Hello friends, this is Grief speaking, and this is all 100 ghost stories that will lead to my own death in one video. This is so that you can marathon the series all in one place without having to skip through intros and outros. Plus, I know there's a certain amount of my viewership who actually likes to fall asleep to these kinds of videos, so here you go. This is 100 ghost stories that will lead to my own death explained. We see a kid looking out an open window, seemingly ready to jump. One of his classmates, a girl named Hina, says that she really thought Yuma was going to die if she didn't do anything. So in order to buy time, she told him about the round of 100 ghost stories. Yuma listened to her till the very end, and then they both went back home. After this, he stopped showing signs of harmful behavior, and it seems she really saved his life. The next page is black, and Yuma says, "Get this, Hina told me about 100 ghost stories just now. You know, when you get finished with all the stories, real ghosts start to appear." The lights come on, and Yuma is looking directly at the reader at his desk. He looks over his shoulder and then begins telling the first story. Tag along. He starts by asking the question of where people go when they die. Is it somewhere alone in the cold dark, doomed to wander for eternity? Do they feel hopeless and forlorn, or do they lose their minds and attach themselves to unwilling hosts? Here we see a woman clearly having just lost her husband when she hears a voice calling to her from a nearby cabinet. The sinister, smiling face of her husband peeks out, only his head is upside down, and he asks her to come inside. She screams and runs away. Next, we see a young couple. The man is distracted on his phone, and his girlfriend asks him why he didn't go out to buy more milk like she asked. He doesn't really give her the time of day and keeps scrolling, so she leaves in a huff to the store to get it herself. A couple hours go by, and the man has been laying on the couch, doom scrolling, when he realizes that she never came back. He shrugs it off and starts getting ready for bed when the bathroom door slowly opens, and the man is shocked to see his girlfriend peeking out from behind the closet door with creepy eyes. Even weirder than that, she's completely naked and beckons to him to come to her. Still, she's half obscured by the door. He ignores her and says he's going to sleep, but she more aggressively tells him to come here, and her face looks pretty off-putting with big black eyes and a gaping mouth. She suddenly screams at him, and her face is fully distorted now. She starts slamming and scratching the door with her hand, and finally goes still. The man starts wondering who this woman really is when he hears the front door open. Realizing this must actually be his girlfriend coming home, he runs over to tell her what's just happened when he stops dead in his tracks. Behind the door, his girlfriend is now fully clothed, but something is still off, and she's deliberately obscuring half her body. In a demonic voice, she says, "If only you hadn't forgotten the milk." At the same time, the man's phone rings, and he answers it only to find the police on the line. They inform him that his girlfriend was in a car accident just outside the convenience store, and she didn't make it to the hospital. She's dead. He tells them that isn't possible. He's looking right at her. He then walks forward and opens the door, and we finally see the other half of the woman's body. It's horribly mutilated, with her eye twisted and her brains falling out of her skull. The man slams the door shut and locks it, then pushes his furniture in front of the balcony window. Feeling like he's blocked all entrances, he sits down in front of the fridge, breathing heavily. Just above his head, the freezer door creaks open, and the demented ghost of his dead girlfriend comes creeping out. That's where Yuma ends the story, and he shuts his desk lamp off, but then turns it back on shakily, saying he's gonna sleep with the lights on tonight. Story 2, dropped. On the second night, Yuma fumbles around his desk. It's unclear if he's putting a camera up or he's talking to some object. Either way, he begins the story. People say that over 95% of all lost items in Japan are returned to their owner. But just because something is returned to you doesn't mean you should be relieved. We see a family coming back from a trip to the park, and it seems the father, named Yusuke, lost his wallet before they could actually do anything. But his son tells him he had fun anyway, making the father cry happy tears at his son's kind words. There's a knock at the door, and it's an officer named Hattori. Turns out he found Yusuke's wallet and is returning it. Yusuke is completely overjoyed and shakes the officer's hand, thanking him. However, shortly after closing the door, he hears a series of frantic knocks and scrapes. Yusuke cracks the door open, and the officer immediately puts his foot in the crack to keep it open. The man is crying and says that he thought he was a useless officer because of his old age, but Yusuke's kind words have moved him into tears. He's covering his eyes with his hands, but his face is wet with tears, and it just doesn't look right. Yusuke says he's glad to hear it, but is clearly uncomfortable and starts to close the door when suddenly Officer Hattori shoves his head in to block it. He says he'll try even harder from now on so he can be of use to Yusuke. At this point, his pupils almost cover his entire eyes, making them black, and it's pretty horrifying. He finally says bye-bye and closes the door. A few days go by, and on his morning walk to work, Yusuke drops his wallet again. He starts looking for it when Officer Hattori shows up out of nowhere and hands it to him before walking away smiling and laughing. From this day on, Yusuke keeps spotting the man everywhere. He even thinks he hears him just outside of his window. One day while on a walk with his son, Hattori brings Yusuke an aluminum can that was clearly garbage and had been thrown away. He snaps on Hattori saying that he never dropped that, he put it in the garbage, and more so he's pretty pissed off that the guy's stalking him all the time. While they have this heated discussion, Yusuke realizes that his kid has walked away somewhere. Suddenly Hattori speeds off and finds the boy washing his hands in a fountain. The officer tells him to come with him, he's gonna bring him back to his dad. The kid is rightfully freaked out and starts running away, but Officer Hattori brutally kicks the kid to the ground and plants his foot on his head. The boy cries for his father, and Hattori says that Yusuke will be so happy when he returns him. His eyes go full black again, and he pulls out his gun, pointing it at the child's head, saying lost items should act like lost items, and to keep quiet. My god, this escalated quickly. He fires the gun, but at the same time, Yusuke has shown up and tackles the cop, saving his kid. Hattori runs away, and back at home, Yusuke calls the police department to file a complaint. Strangely, the department says they have no records of an Officer Hattori ever working there. The family stands there pretty shaken up about everything, and behind them, under the kitchen table, we see the officer hunched over, holding a spoon that was likely dropped. Yuma ends the story there, and using a small patterned cloth covers the camera. Story 3, Clayman. Once again, Yuma looks over his shoulder like he's trying to be sure he's alone before starting the third story. It starts with a full page of a kind of creepy looking clay figure. A lonely teen named Haruto doesn't have any friends, and so he decided to make one using clay. This was just as a joke, but when he starts to leave his desk, a voice calls out to him. It's the Clayman, and he asks Haruto to spray some water on him before he cracks. Haruto does just that, and soon finds that he has a lovable little clay friend who can talk and move by itself. One day, Haruto comes into his room to find Clayman using his computer. He's a little pissed about it, but Clayman says he did some research and found that he's likely a Tsukumogami, a spirit-inhabited object. Basically, he's a god. When he finds Haruto texting some kids from school, Clayman gets pissed and throws a hunk of clay at the phone, saying he's the only friend he'll ever need. Haruto says it's a little weird to have a clay figure as a friend and that humans should be friends with humans. He puts the little dude back in the clay box, but Clayman begs for him to open it up one more time. Feeling bad, Haruto opens the box to reveal something really disturbing. Clayman has slightly transformed to look a little more human. He laughs and says, "I'm just like a human now." It's unsettling to say the least. Haruto slams the box shut and throws it into a back alley garbage pile. At school the next day, some bullies tell Haruto to go buy them some snacks, suggesting they'll be his friend if he does. While he goes to buy the snacks, the bullies hang out on the roof and a figure comes up behind them. It's not Haruto, but Clayman, and he's human-sized. Thrown off, one of the bullies calls him gross and throws a punch at the creature. His fist sinks into the clay and is engulfed. We then hear loud cracking noises and the kid pulls his arm out of the clay, only to find it completely mangled and twisted, with bones sticking out from his skin. It's really messed up, man. Soon, Haruto arrives at the top of the stairwell with the snacks. There he finds Clayman, back to a smaller size, standing in front of the door to the roof. Even stranger, the door outside is sealed up with clay. Clayman reminds him that he's the only friend he'll ever need. He jumps on Haruto's shoulder and grabs him by the hair, screaming at him, "Isn't that right?" And the terrified Haruto shakily agrees. The only friend he'll ever need is Clayman. As Yuma wraps up the story, his bedroom door starts to open, and in a panic, he covers the camera with a book. We then hear a voice asking if he was talking to someone, and Yuma says he was just reading aloud. The door shuts and the chapter ends there. Well, that interaction was a little weird. Story 4, Package Delivered. Yuma's intro here is a little off. He says this is story number 4 and holds up 4 fingers, and then freezes looking at his hand before his body starts shaking all over. This is because 4 is considered an unlucky number in Japan, associated with death. Anyway, the story follows a young man named Suzuki who's running late for work. This is because he spent too much time on his hair. As he sprints out of his building, he wishes he had hair like his manager, dry and smooth. As he gets to the lobby, he notices one of the mailboxes, which has always been taped shut, has opened up. Even weirder, inside there seems to be human hair. Well, he doesn't have much time to question it and heads to the convenience store to start his shift. Here he sees one of his coworkers who is obsessed with facial piercings. They have some playful banter where the guy offers Suzuki his piercings and he says, "Sure, I'll take them." In an instant, the piercings tear out of the guy's head and vanish, leaving bloody holes all over his face. It's actually pretty shocking because of how sudden it happens. Before they can even process what just happened, the assistant manager comes out from the back room and says that the manager was hospitalized this morning after being attacked by some psycho with hair clippers. That evening, Suzuki returns home and passes by the mailboxes in the lobby. He looks over at the strange open mailbox and sees something disturbing. It's full of facial piercings. The next day, on a shift at the store, Suzuki wonders if those piercings belong to his coworker, and if so, was the hair from his manager. As he thinks about this, the assistant manager comes out and asks what he thinks of her new nails, saying she bets he wishes he had nails like this. Jokingly, Suzuki says, yeah, he wishes he did. As you might expect at this point, the woman's nails tear off her fingers all the way down to the base. It's pretty disgusting. Suzuki returns to his apartment in a sweat and opens the mailbox. Inside, he finds a pile of bloody nails. This confirms his theory that the box is taking the things he says he wants. Feeling sick to his stomach, he feels he needs to seal it up somehow. He heads to the hardware store and grabs some super glue, and while there, runs into another one of his coworkers who he has a big crush on. She happens to be shopping with her husband, who's actually a nice guy, and offers to buy the glue for Suzuki. He asks if there's anything else he wants, and Suzuki can't help but have the thought, I want your wife. As soon as this crosses his mind, the woman seems to vanish. Suzuki freaks out and sprints all the way back to his apartment, afraid of what he's going to find. He slowly opens up the mailbox, and inside is the crying, severed head of his crush. Yuma ends the story there and pulls out what looks like a marker before saying sleep tight. What's the marker for? Well, maybe to mark off his calendar that we can see in the background. Story 5, Tempting Waters. Yuma starts this story in the dead of night. 3 friends swim in a small spring despite the danger signs nearby. One friend named Kenji spots something weird in the water. Some bubbles are rapidly surfacing and there seems to be a face down below. Kenji rushes over to try and help whoever's drowning, but a dark arm shoots out of the water and grabs him, pulling him under. His 2 friends see what's happened and thankfully pull him onto shore. He asks if they help the other person too, but they didn't see anyone else. Later at the local ramen shop, they discuss the bizarre situation and one of the cooks overhears. He says there's a nearby beach that is forbidden. Every now and then people are found having drowned. It seems to have all began years ago when a young couple went there to commit double suicide. However, the woman couldn't go through with it despite her lover trying to pull her down with him. Before walking away, the creepy cook tells Kenji to avoid any bodies of water because once it spots you, it won't give up. Kenji's friends assure him there's nothing to the story, but in his friend's cup of tea, he sees a dark figure begin to surface. He freaks out and falls to the floor. One friend helps him up, but when they look over, the other friend who was holding the cup is now gone. In the parking lot, Kenji is spooked and suggests that maybe the water entity he saw grabbed her. His friend tells him to calm down and have a bottle of water. Of course, Kenji sees the dark figure on the surface of the water and smacks it out of his friend's hand. It falls to the ground, creating a puddle, and Kenji gets into his car, shutting the doors. In a splash, his friend is suddenly gone, taken into the freshly formed puddle. Panicking, Kenji drives off and hours pass. He's too afraid to leave the car because at least he knows there's no water inside. Realizing his friends are now dead, he can't help but break into tears and sobs into the steering wheel. He then hears a bubbling noise and looks down at the small puddle of his own tears, where a dark entity starts rising up. In the last panel, we simply see a splash from outside the car. Still in the dark, Yuma quietly ends the story and starts walking to his bed when he runs into his chair, causing a clatter. Shortly after, there's a knock and someone asks if Yuma is still awake. He says he just got up to use the bathroom and the chapter ends. Story 6, Lifeline. Instead of Yuma, we see his stuffed animal introducing the 6th story. I will warn you, this story, for the most part, is actually less disturbing than the others, but the ending is really messed up and pretty dark. It starts with a group of friends out for dinner. One of them claims to read palms, and she reads the palms of a man named Kajiwara and says that his lifeline is unusually short. She says that his future wife will outlive him by years. A woman at the table then says that she has a short lifeline as well, and comparing palms, they find them to be nearly the same. They joke that if they get married, they wouldn't miss each other for long. Well, what started as a joke turned into marriage, and soon a baby girl. They can't help but notice that their baby doesn't have a lifeline at all. Soon the couple starts obsessing about their short lifelines, assuming they should be dying any time now, and they go insane. They lock themselves inside, terrified that if they leave the house, they'll all die. Kajiwara even believes that everyone is jealous of them and wants to kill them. Soon his boss comes by, worried since Kajiwara hasn't showed up to work in a few days. Kajiwara slams the door on him and tells his wife to hide, assuming his boss is here to kill them. Trapped inside and out of options, Kajiwara starts cursing the palm reader from all those years ago. He then gets an idea. They need to extend their lives, right? He picks up a broken piece of glass and in a pretty jarring few panels cuts his hand down the center, literally extending his lifeline. He then demands his wife do it as well. She refuses, but after a struggle, he does the same to her. Worst of all, he must do this for his baby as well. And this manga doesn't hold back at all. It actually shows him using the glass shard on his baby's hand. Outside, his boss has called the police, and eventually they break down the door and find a grisly sight. Kajiwara and his family dead on the couch from blood loss. Ironically, they did all die at the same time, but by their own doing. At the end of the story, the stuffed doll introduces himself as Umaken. Of course, this is just Yuma holding him up from under the table. Story 7, Con Artist. In this chapter, we don't actually see Yuma, but rather hear his voice coming from the floor. He says, "Do you ever just lay on the ground and pretend you're dead? I'm dead, so nothing in the world matters anymore. Isn't thinking like that fun?" Right. Anyway, let's get to the story. It starts with a series of messages on an answering machine. A young man is calling his mother and says that he's sorry if his voice sounds strange. He has a dry throat. More importantly, he's in big trouble and needs 2 million yen, but promises to pay it back. He'll send a friend over to collect the cash from her soon. Sure enough, we see a man in a suit show up to the house to collect the money. And though we don't see her, we can hear his elderly mother ask if her boy is going to be okay, before handing off an envelope full of cash. The man says her son will be just fine and walks away. Well, turns out that this is a con artist who preys on old people by pretending to be their kids in need of help. As he leaves the house, the neighbor spots him and says he'll have no luck finding anyone in that house. The woman who lived there passed away months ago. The con man finds this confusing as the supposedly dead woman just handed him a stack of cash. He double checks the envelope and finds it to be empty. And when he looks up at the house, it's empty as well. And there's even a for rent sign up. He sits at a park bench utterly baffled when he suddenly gets a call from the old woman he just scammed. He picks it up only to hear the woman mutter the question, "Is my boy gonna be okay?" The man hangs up immediately and heads back to his apartment. When he arrives, he finds a letter in the door, signed by the old woman. He rips it up and heads inside, fully on edge. Then his phone starts ringing. He ignores it, but the person starts leaving messages on the machine. As you may have guessed, it's the old woman asking if her boy is gonna be okay. He rips the phone out of the wall, but next gets someone buzzing his apartment, causing him to destroy the buzzer. Some time passes and the man is afraid to leave. Outside, there's constant knocks on the door and the woman asking if her son will be okay. In order to drown her out, he puts on headphones with loud music, but suddenly he hears her voice in the headphones and screams. Next, we see an older man getting a call from his son. It's the con man. He tells his dad he's sorry and that he got reeled into a scam. His father berates him and says he's not bailing him out on this one. In tears, the man tries to tell his father that he was the scammer, but slowly his voice wavers and the father only hears the voice of an old woman asking if her boy is going to be okay. On the final page, we see the con artist hanging from the ceiling by his phone cord. Yuma ends the story still laying on the floor. He says the other good thing about it is that you can more easily hear the sounds of your house. As if to prove his point, he seems to hear a noise and gets up, quickly pretending to study. He says, "I'll be alright, see you tomorrow." What does he mean, I'll be alright? The subtle mystery of what's going on here is getting pretty interesting. Story 8, fight. Yuma is reluctant to tell another story as it's late, and he gets pretty scared at this time of night, but he finally decides to tell one anyway. A girl named Akari says she had a big fight with her friend Tomoko yesterday. On her way to school, she decides to stop by Tomoko's house and make up with her, but something is a little off. Right before Akari pushes the doorbell, the front door opens, and Tomoko's voice comes from inside, telling her not to push it. Akari starts to apologize and reaches for the door, but Tomoko tells her not to touch it and to keep her filthy hands off of it. Eventually, Tomoko just tells her to leave. Akari insists that they work this out and says she's not leaving until she sees her face. Finally, Tomoko slowly peeks her face out from the door. Oddly enough, her head pokes out at knee height, close to the ground. We get a detailed look, and her face is drenched in sweat and tears. She looks completely distressed and says, "You saw my face, now get out of my sight." Akari assumes she's only acting this way because she's so upset, and apologizes again. Tomoko smiles, but then suddenly shoots back into the house in a flash, and the door slams shut. Akari wonders what her deal is and just heads off to school. When she arrives, she finds that the school is being evacuated and everyone is sent home on account of a gruesome killer that's on the loose. Akari considers this a good thing and is psyched to get a day off school. When she gets home, her mother is hysterical, saying, "Thank God you're alive, especially since you visit Tomoko's house every morning." She says that the slasher that's on the run was hiding inside of Tomoko's house. Akari, worried about her friend, heads over to her house to find it taped off and police everywhere. She asks one of the people nearby if the girl who lived in this house is okay, and they give her some disturbing news. Everyone in the house was killed. It was pretty gnarly too. To make sure no one could escape, the killer cut off all their legs. Apparently the daughter crawled all the way to the front door and almost made it out. Akari is in total shock. Thinking back on the conversation she had this morning with Tomoko, she realizes she wasn't really angry with her. She was trying to save her life. We now see the situation from Tomoko's perspective, sticking her head out of the door while her mutilated legs drag behind her. Pretty messed up. Yuma closes out the story and says it's time to go to bed. He seems to hear a noise and sprints to his mattress, turning off the lights and hiding under the covers. From outside his door, we suddenly hear rapid footsteps, and his door handle jiggles frantically before finally the door swings open with an eerie force. And we see nothing but blackness on the other side. Okay, that was definitely the most outright freaky Yuma moment so far. What the hell is going on in his house? Story 9, The Other Side. Yuma sits at his desk saying that it's almost time for everyone to be coming back from school, when presumably one of his parents say that his friend Hina has come to see him. He says that he's not feeling well right now and lets out a couple of fake coughs, and then continues into the story saying we should be okay. We see a teacher named Sakuma walk through the school halls, and he's clearly very popular with the students, who all greet him kindly as he walks by. He hears a commotion and finds a young kid being bullied. He puts a stop to it and has a chat with the kid named Akai in an empty classroom. Sakuma says that the kid should have said something. He could have kept those guys off his back. Akai then bluntly says that he wants to die, and Sakuma encourages him, saying he still has a lot of life to live and he shouldn't say such things. On a closer look, this kid doesn't look right. His face is mostly obscured by his hair, but his eyes are just off. He asks his teacher if he's ever lived in a house where you get beaten just for coughing. Do you go through the day dreading coming back from school because your parents will torture you? He then says from the moment he was born, his life has been torment and he believes it'll never end. He screams out that he wants to move on to the other side and bashes his head on his desk. Sakuma says that it must have been tough holding all of that in, but Akai can depend on him. He won't allow his pupil to suffer like this. Akai thanks him and then asks for his help with something. He leads Sakuma to the mountain trail behind the school, saying that a lot of people take their lives out here. Sakuma says he better not be wanting his help with that, and Akai assures him that that's not it. Well, honestly, his request isn't much better than that. They get to a cliffside, and Akai says he wants to meet someone who's dead. That way he could ask them if he's better off living or if there really is a paradise waiting for him on the other side. He then asks Sakuma to strangle him, not to the point of death, but close enough that he might be able to speak to someone on the other side. The teacher immediately refuses and starts walking away, saying that he can't participate in such crazy delusions. Akai then pulls out a box knife and says he can die and charges at him. Sakuma defends himself by punching the kid hard in the face, which sends him tumbling off the edge of the cliff. Sakuma cries out and looks looks down only to see the kid's body smashed into the ground. Strangely, he looks happy. Some time passes and Akai's death was ruled a suicide. The only silver lining is that maybe he can be at peace now. As Sakuma walks into his empty classroom, he hears a rustling and a figure appears outside the window. The ghost of Akai calls out for his sensei when many dark hands start grabbing him and pulling him back. His eyeless face turns to agony as he cries out for Sakuma not to come to this side. It's so much worse. And finally, blood sprays across the window. As Yuma ends the story, Hina suddenly walks into his room, asking him why he missed the parent visit at school today. He's completely thrown off seeing her and just says that he has a cold and doesn't want to spread it. She finally takes the hint and leaves. Story 10. Snails. Yuma crawls out of bed after hearing his alarm and half awake walks over to his desk to start the story. A man named Kimura wakes up in bed and looks a little unsettled as he clutches the left side of his head. He goes to see a doctor and tells him that he's been having this throbbing feeling deep inside his ear for the last 3 days. Now it feels like it's spreading through his head. The doctor says he'll take a look and has Kimura lay down. Using a light and some tweezers, the doc looks into Kimura's ears where he finds a slug. Yeah, this one made me squirm. The doctor pulls it out and informs Kimura that there was some kind of bug lodged into his ear, but his problem should be gone now and he should check back in a week. I don't know, man, that doctor was way too calm in my opinion. Well, Kimura gets back to his apartment and suddenly hears a rustling sound deep in his skull. He walks inside and slime starts dripping out of his nose. He sneezes and finds weird lumps and blood in his mucus. Gross. Kimura starts Googling the symptoms and actually finds an article about a recent death where a body was found with snail-like creatures in their head. Kimura immediately calls the doctor's office and says he's become extremely sick and that he found some cases that seem to be just like his online. He tries to pull up the article but sees that it's been deleted, and the nurse warns him about online hoaxes, telling him to just give himself time to heal. At this point, the clumpy discharge is coming out of Kimura's eyes as well, and he sneezes once again. This time, a large chunk of something flies out, and it looks like brain matter. Disturbed and panicking, Kimura climbs out of his apartment while the mucus flows from his face. He sees his neighbor and asks her to call an ambulance, but she just looks scared and goes inside of her apartment. Kimura's head collapses onto the ground, and his face softens as his brains pour out of his mouth. A week passes and Kimura seems to be alive and entering his apartment, but we can't see his face. His neighbor sees him and looks absolutely horrified. Inside, he gets a call from the doctor checking in on him and seeing how he feels. He says he's in tip-top shape, and we finally see his face, where there are dozens of snails poking out of his mouth, eyes, and ears, as if his head is the shell. Back at the doctor's office, we see that he and his nurse look exactly the same, as if they too are being consumed by the snails. Yuma finishes up the story as he gets ready, and someone yells for him to hurry up. He says goodbye and that he has a picnic to go to. Story 11. Mr. Poke. Yuma comes into his room soaking wet, saying he forgot his umbrella and had to run home in the rain. But that doesn't stop him from getting right into the 11th story. An office worker named Osawa is working late into the night and is the only person in the office. The ticking clock on the wall is driving him crazy, so he calls up the building security to see if they could remove it. The security guard says it's actually a good thing he has it up, otherwise it could be dangerous on account of Mr. Poke. Curious, Osawa bites, and the guard tells him the story of a businessman who worked in the building. After being only a couple of minutes late to an important meeting, he was fired, and that night he hung himself on the clock post outside the building. Since then, he appears around the building at night asking for the time. Osawa laughs it off, assuming he's just messing with him, but before he hangs up the phone, the guard warns him if Mr. Poke asks for the time, he needs to give the correct answer. Osawa gets back to work until he gets a call from someone asking him the time. He says 1:25 a.m. and the person hangs up. This is enough to really spook Osawa, but fear is a good motivator and he finishes up his work just before 2. Just as he's shutting down his computer, he hears a noise coming from the other side of the room, and suddenly a shadowy figure peeks up from the other side of his desk, asking for the time. Osawa is efficiently terrified, but keeps cool enough to say the correct time, 1:57. The figure then disappears, and at this point, Osawa bolts out of his office and toward the elevator. He watches over his shoulder, and when the elevator finally opens, he hears a ticking noise. Mr. Poke is waiting in the dark, asking for the time. Osawa screams and takes the stairs instead until finally he's made it out of the building. He sighs in relief until he once again hears a ticking noise and realizes he's standing in front of the clock post. Behind him, in a very disturbing image, is the man still hanging and asking for the time. And that wraps up story 11. Yuma lets out a sneeze and blows his nose. It seems he may be getting a real cold now. Someone yells at him from the hall about soaking the floor and walking around in wet clothes. Story 12, Candy Shop. Yuma takes a break from his homework in order to tell the 12th story. Some school kids are disappointed to find that their local candy shop has closed down. One kid in particular says he was worried about the old man who owns it. Just before he walks away with everyone else, there's a clatter and the shutters on the shop rise up a bit. Curious, the kid peeks in and sees all the candy left inside. With no one watching, he can't resist and climbs in. Assuming all these treats will go to waste anyway, he throws some in his bag, but before he can leave, the shutters close and he can't lift them back up. Walking into the dark from a back room, the owner calls out asking who's there, and soon the old man makes his way to the kid holding a power drill. For some reason. The boy says he's sorry, this was all a mistake, and the old man, his eyes bulging, simply asks the boy to follow him. I guess thinking he can get away with it, the boy zips his bag up without giving the candy back, and the candy man sits him down on a stool across from his desk. He's not mad at the kid and actually thanks him. He's been coming to his shop since he was a baby after all, and is touched that he stopped by the shop despite it being closed now. The boy is curious why it's closing exactly. The sign said it had something to do with the owner's health. But the old man says it isn't really his health. It's because of shoplifters. All he wanted was to run a store that kids dreamed of, but he can't make a living with all the theft. At this point, the kid is sweating, considering he just pocketed a few sweets himself. The old man seems a little crazy and says that if he could catch some of these thieves in the act, he would force them to eat a special candy he made from nails, glass, and dead bugs. My God. He takes it further by saying he'll make sure they never eat again by drilling holes through their mouths and stomachs. And we can even see 2 dummies that he was practicing on. I guess that explains the drill. His face all distorted, the old man asks if the kid knows who's doing it. Visibly scared now, he says no. Broken down into tears, the old man apologizes for keeping him so long and says that the kid can leave out the side door. Right before he leaves, the kid feels too much guilt and starts crying as he pulls the candy he took from his bag. He tells the man he's sorry and offers it back. Kinda reminds me of the scene at the end of Willy Wonka when Charlie returns the everlasting gobstopper. Only this story goes a different direction. The old man thanks him for being honest, but says it's too bad he can't let him get away with it. He locks the door and pulls out his drill, pressing it to the boy's cheek. Outside the shop, we hear blood-curdling screams. Yuma finishes up the story and then gets back to his homework where he gets a perfect score on his practice test. Story 13. Normal household. The next day, Yuma shows how he scored 100% on the real test and is pretty pleased with himself. In the story, a father wakes up in the morning and talks about how he has the perfect life with a beautiful wife and honor student daughter. He grew up with relatives and all he wanted as a kid was to have a normal family. He says good morning to his daughter, but she just ignores him. He then demands his breakfast and his wife scrambles to get it ready. She finally places it down and the father is disgusted to see it's fish, saying he's grown to hate this meal. His daughter continues ignoring him and gets up to go to the bathroom when he fully snaps, raising a hand like he's about to hit her. She's frozen with fear, but her mother tells him to stop. He then demands that she at least apologize and slams his fist on the table. Like a child, he just repeatedly asks her to apologize over and over, and his erratic behavior is really unsettling. Finally, his wife says that something is wrong with him and that they've been meaning to talk about it, but he can't keep hitting them because they don't do exactly as he says. They're not his servants. She then asks for him to leave the house. This sets him off and he screams at them that he bought this house and that they can be the ones to leave. In fact, they shouldn't take anything either as it's all bought with his money. He even goes so far as to call them his playthings. Strangely, the daughter starts laughing and says, "See, Mom, we were right all along." Her mother says, "Yeah, I guess we were, though I feel a little guilty. I'd hoped we could have talked this out before it came to this." Like us, the father is really confused and then he suddenly spits up blood and starts coughing violently on the floor. The wife gladly says she poisoned his food, but he points out that he never ate it. Well, here's where it gets weird. She says she poisoned his fish yesterday and he should have been dead by nightfall, but instead he keeps showing up again and again, coming and going like nothing's wrong. His daughter yells at him to finally die. He can't stay in this house forever. They tell him to open the bathroom door and look inside, but he refuses, so finally his wife opens it. Inside is the father's dead, rotting corpse. It seems the poison finally kicked in while he was on the John, and he's been dead this whole time. The man they've been talking to is his ghost. The story ends, and someone comes to Yuma's door asking how he did on the test. Yuma says he got 100 points and holds up the test when a hand reaches in. Yuma flinches, but the hand simply ruffles his hair and leaves. At this point, there's definitely some weird shit going on, but it's all been way too vague to tell. Does he have a ghost in his house? Maybe an abusive parent? I have no idea. Story 14. Good morning. The chapter opens with Yuma talking to someone in his room, though they're obscured by the stuffed animal. It turns out to be Hina, and Yuma says he wants to hear more of the ghost stories she told him at school. He looks over at his desk and says, let's go ahead with the 14th story, which confuses Hina, but she shrugs it off and starts to tell it. This one is pretty short. A student seems distressed about his classmate Kaneko greeting everyone as they enter the classroom. That's because Kaneko died a week ago, and he seems to be the only one who can see her ghost. As a punishment, Kaneko was instructed by the teacher to greet every student as they entered the class until she got someone to greet her back. But the kids thought it was funny not to respond to her at all. Still, she felt it her duty to do it every day. Then one day she was hit by a car and killed. Now her ghost hasn't been able to move on. Finally, the student greets her back, weirding out the rest of the class who don't see her, but it seems her spirit can now move on. After finishing the story, Hina says she'd like to hear one from Yuma, and he says that he'll tell her one tomorrow. He says she can come over whenever she likes, but she needs to ask permission first. From who, she wonders. But before Yuma answers, the 5 o'clock chime goes off, and he says she needs to leave. Story 15. Mirror image. Yuma has built a paper frog and is having fun making it hop. His expression changes suddenly and he says that they don't have time to be messing around. Let's get started on the 15th story. Ryu and his friend are hanging out in the bathroom at school when his friend looks in the mirror and wonders how the mirror versions of them feel. We move however we want and the mirror people have to obey us. Makes you wonder if they're envious of us for being on this side of the mirror. Ryu laughs it off, but later that night, looking at his reflection, he can't help but think about it. He even talks to his reflection for a minute before deciding he's acting silly and leaves the bathroom. However, his reflection seems to have a sinister face. He then walks by the mirror in his bedroom and thinks he sees something odd from the corner of his eye. He turns to look at his stand-up mirror and finds his reflection making a horrifying deformed face at him. In fear, Ryu throws the mirror to the ground, but in the shattered glass, his reflection looks at him with a ghoulish face. He runs downstairs but can't avoid all the reflections around the room that are all looking at him. He tries to calm himself down when he gets a call from his friend. However, as he looks at the surface of his phone, he once again sees that horrid face looking back at him. The next morning, Ryu's father comes out of his room to find him sitting in the hallway corner where there are no reflections. Ryu tries to tell his father what's happened and how his reflection won't stop looking at him. He sounds crazy, of course, and his father suggests maybe the mirror looks like that because of the face you're making. We see Ryu's unhinged face, which is pretty scary, honestly. At that moment, Ryu sees his own reflection in his father's eyes and runs away screaming. He slips on the stairs, however, breaking his ankle and tumbling to the bottom with a sickening snap. His father looks down to see Ryu dead with a pool of blood around his head. In the blood, we can see his reflection smiling. Yuma ends the story and thinks he hears a noise. Then there's a loud thump outside the door and he quickly hides under his covers and turns the lights off. Once again, the door swings open and we see only black. This time, a shadowy figure appears and walks toward his desk. It reaches out. There's a loud noise and the screen goes black. Okay, well that confirms that something strange is definitely going on. It seems like a supernatural entity, but at the same time the lights are off, so maybe it's just Yuma's father covered in shadows. Either way, it gives me the heebie-jeebies. Story 16. Online dating. Yuma finds his paper frog completely destroyed on his desk and starts to cry as he shovels it into a trash bin. Then he starts the 16th story. A woman's relationship with her boyfriend is on the rocks. He scolds her for being lazy lazy while he heads off for work. She decides to try online dating to snag a new boyfriend before they inevitably break up. She matches with a guy named Shun, and they seem to hit it off, constantly texting each other, though he hasn't shown what he looks like. One day, Shun thinks it'd be fun to tell each other ghost stories. His story is about an unhappy man who had 3 previous girlfriends that all broke up with him and ghosted him. It wasn't the fact they broke up with him that made the man sad. It was that they all were dating other men behind his back first. Ever since then, whenever the man was longing to meet the women he had dated, he went to the mountains to see them. Shun ends the story by saying he is that man. Pretty creepy, and what's with that ending? Shun reminds her it's just a ghost story, but still the woman is pretty freaked out and stops talking to him. A few days later, while at the grocery store, the woman gets a message from Shun asking why she stopped replying. He then says he's going to meet her face to face, seeing that she's in range. Startled, the woman sees there's a spot on the app that shows your match's range. Well, that's a creepy feature. Anyway, Shun is only 300 meters away. The woman breaks into a cold sweat and drops her groceries, running out of the store. All the while, Shun is getting closer and closer, and she's terrified he could be any guy she's passing. Stopping to catch her breath, a large hand grabs her shoulder, and she turns to see a large, sweaty man looking at her. She screams and runs away, but the guy was only trying to give her her handkerchief, which she dropped. Making it back to her apartment, she locks the door, but when she looks at her phone, she sees that Shun is only 10 meters away. Footsteps are heard just outside, and the door is slowly unlocked and opened. But it's just the woman's actual boyfriend, looking puzzled by her stunned appearance. She lets out a sigh of relief and gets another message from Shun. He says, "At least see what I look like and then decide to go out with me," and sends her his social media profile. She opens it and is surprised to see her actual boyfriend Kyosuke's profile. As she stares at her phone confused, we see her boyfriend behind her holding his phone and staring at her. I can't tell if her boyfriend knew it was her the whole time or not. He looked confused in the final panel, but if you look at his bag, he seems to have rope and some other suspicious items. I think when he said he met the girls he dated at the mountain, he meant their buried corpses. The story ends, and with tears in his eyes, Yuma starts putting books back on his shelf that clearly fell, I guess due to the entity in his room last night. And one of his parents tells him to quiet down, it's too early to be loud. Story 17, The Boy Who Was Thrown Away. One of Yuma's parents yells at him through the door, asking if he's gonna lay in bed all day, and says that this child needs to be taught a lesson. He sits at his desk and tells the next story. This one is maybe the strangest so far, and definitely messed up. It begins with a mother throwing her young child in a garbage can, saying, "Bad children like you belong in the trash." She shoves him in deeper and jams the lid down despite the boy screaming that it hurts. His feet and arms are all smashed in as he cries in the dark. She yells at him to shut up and puts a heavy box on top so he can't get out. Once she leaves, he cries out in agony, feeling the trash against his skin and a cockroach crawling on his face. Later, his mother comes back drunk and opens the trash only to dump her empty beer cans on top of her son. The kid wonders how his own mother could treat him so terribly. It's been so torturous that he can't even cry anymore. Is he just trash to her? As he says this, the boy's face seems to almost change, partly into a plastic bag, like he's actually becoming trash. His finger is broken and feet bent. He describes the awful hell that he's in, how it itches and burns. It's cold and dark, and he's so lonely. The next day, the mom walks out and almost seems surprised when she remembers what she did. It's unclear to me whether she meant to kill him or not, but either way, she's even more surprised to hear him moving around inside. She opens it and looks mortified at what she sees, as the boy's distorted face comes out, smiling, with a flurry of crooked arms and legs reaching for her. We see blood splatter, and it ends there. Yuma closes out the story by asking what you would do in a situation like that. When children are put into positions like that, are they completely powerless? He's interrupted by one of his parents yelling at him again, asking if he's still in his pajamas. They then say if he wants to be lazy, he can stay in here all day, and they slam the door. Okay, well, this confirms that one or both of his parents are abusive, at the very least verbally, but there's been some heavy implications there's physical abuse as well. So maybe there is no ghost. Maybe poor Yuma is just in a real-life nightmare. Story 18. Clean gum. Yuma is looking out his window into the dead of night when he assures us not to worry. He'll take his time with it. The story starts with a strange panel of a guy obnoxiously chewing gum. His name is Yamada, and his coworker Shiki asks about the gum that he's been chewing lately. Yamada tells him something bizarre. Chewing this gum will let you relive any memory you want. He asks Shiki to think of a memory he'd want to relive and write it down on a strip of gum before chewing it. Shiki goes along with this for the sake of amusement, but once the gum enters his mouth, he's suddenly taken taken back to the moment he proposed to his wife, fully reliving it as if he's actually there. His wife says yes, and they cry tears of joy, but soon she fades from his arms and everything goes blank. He snaps back to reality in the break room and says it's gone, but doesn't know what is gone exactly. Yamada then informs him that as the flavor of the gum fades, so does the memory, and the really messed up part is that you can never recall that memory again. Shiki is rightfully pissed. Why didn't Yamada tell him that before he ate the gum? But he figured Shiki wouldn't believe him otherwise. There's a sad moment where Shiki feels like he's lost a really important memory, but he doesn't know what it is. He asks Yamada where he got the gum in the first place, but he says he chewed that memory away as well. Yamada hates his job here and figures at the very least they can relive some cherished memories. Suddenly, Shiki is hit with an idea. Why does it have to be good memories? There's plenty of bad memories he'd love to get rid of. He frantically jots down several terrible memories and shoves multiple pieces of gum in his mouth at once, despite Yamada's warnings. Shiki is hit with several terrible moments all at the same time. His boss breaking a bottle over his head and chastising him, and his wife calling him a liar and holding a kitchen knife. It's unclear if she's going to divorce him or attack him in this memory, but in reality, Shiki looks completely unhinged as he chomps on all the gum and his face sags. It's scary for sure, but after a moment, he's all smiles, saying this gum is awesome. He feels like a big weight has been lifted off of him. Yamada says if he really wants to, he can take the rest of it. He only has a couple of good memories left, and he's saving those to chew on for when he dies. We can then see his last will and testament sticking out of his bag, and it's clear that he plans on ending his own life. Shiki says, why would you want to do that when you can chew all your pain away? Yamada, like a drug addict, says he's right, it's too late to stop now, and grabs another piece. Outside the break room, we can hear Shiki screams and Yamada's laughter. After this story, Yuma climbs partly out of his window like he's gonna jump, when someone tells him to shut the window before the bugs get in, so he closes it and goes to bed. Story 19, Hashaku-sama. Before Yuma starts the story, he pulls a test out of his bag, and we can see that he's done poorly. He shoves it back in looking worried, and then begins the tale. The story starts ominously enough with a tall woman looking over a schoolyard fence. A boy notices she's dropped her hat and kindly walks over to hand it to her. Once he does, the woman lets out a strange laugh and grabs his face with her oversized hands. His classmates tell him to get away from there, and she vanishes. They then tell him the story of Hashaku-sama, a monster in the form of an insanely tall woman who has a weird laugh and can mimic others' voices. They say if Hashaku-sama takes a liking to you, she'll haunt you till you die. The boy argues that she wasn't that tall, but they remind him that on the other side of that fence is a steep slope nearly 2 meters to the ground. Class starts and the kid is sufficiently scared. Outside, the rain picks up, and amongst the raindrops, he starts hearing something that reminds him of the woman's weird laugh. The laugh becomes more and more pronounced until finally, he asks if he can go to the nurse's office. The teacher asks if he needs someone to go with him, but before the boy can say yes, he hears his own voice reply, "No, I'm fine." The teacher shuts the door and the kid makes his way through the eerie dark halls, all the while hearing the laughter and seeing tall shadows outside the window. When he finally makes it to the nurse's office, he asks if he can go home, but soon the voice of another child comes from the hall. The nurse goes to take a look, and the kid sits scared in the hospital bed behind the curtain. The nurse's voice begins speaking to him, calling him a bad boy, and we can see a menacing eye leering way up over the curtain. Suddenly, the real nurse walks in, and there's a struggle we can only see via silhouette through the curtains. An unnaturally tall figure picks the nurse up and seems to snap her in half at the middle. A long, bloody hand reaches over the curtain and into the boy's mouth. In the final panel, Hashaku-sama, with her long fingers in the kid's mouth, says, "Now I know you'll never forget me." What the hell? Yuma closes the story, and we finally see his mother enter the room. She asks how he did on the test, and Yuma pretends he doesn't know what she's talking about, but she ignores him and pulls it out of his bag. The woman tears up the test, and as Yuma apologizes, she smacks him across the face. That's where this chapter ends, and we have a much better understanding as to what's going on now. It seems Yuma's mother is definitely abusive, and this might be what led to Yuma wanting to die in the first place. Story 20, Dangerous Neighbor. As Yuma studies, we can see his mother watching him from the doorway, but when he turns around, she's gone, and he begins the story. A man comes home to his apartment to find a note on his door calling him an asshole and telling him to leave. It seems this isn't the first time, and we can see his neighbor, a young woman, watching from her door. Later, he leaves to take his trash out and finds another note insulting him. He tears it up when the girl next door confronts him, saying these notes are because of her. She asks to come in, where she explains that it's not her leaving the notes, but her stalker. She's gone to the police, but but hasn't had any luck. The stalker actually harassed the previous tenant until they left and this guy moved in. He empathizes with her and says that he's sorry she has to deal with all that, offering to walk her home anytime she'd like. She's overwhelmed by his kindness and takes him up on the offer. Of course, the notes keep appearing day after day and are more and more severe. One day after walking the girl home, there's no note on the door. Instead, he finds it on the inside of his apartment. Of course, this sends the man into a panic, and the woman offers to let him stay with her for the night. There's some heavy flirtation, and the next day, it's pretty clear that they had sex. The man leaves her apartment for a minute and walks over to his, where he pulls a note out of his own pocket and tapes it to the door. He calls for his neighbor to see it and then says maybe he should stay with her a little longer. Yep, this guy is the stalker, and this was all a clever ruse to get with her. As Yuma ends the story, his mother comes in pissed off that he's not studying and starts to slap him when suddenly the door to his room slams shut and the screen goes fuzzy. When the picture clears, we see his mother's hand has been stabbed with a pencil and the chapter ends there. Okay, so it seems there may be something supernatural going on after all. Maybe Yuma has been telling the stories with plans to get help from a ghost to deal with his mother. Story 21, Smothered in Dust. Yuma comes rushing in out of breath and starts to talk about what happened yesterday, but says never mind and instead tells another ghost story. A man has been non-stop cleaning his apartment, but there's still dust everywhere. This never happened before, and then suddenly last week, dust started accumulating like crazy. The only odd thing that happened last week was meeting the old man who moved in upstairs. He said he lives alone, and it's nice to know someone will be there to notice him when he finally kicks the bucket. Kind of a sad thing to say. The man keeps cleaning but is still finding dust. He tries to drink some water and there's dust floating in it. His toothbrush is covered with the stuff, and when he yells out frustrated, the dust starts collecting in his teeth. Yuck. He starts searching online for sources of dust buildup. Of course, there's plenty of answers, but one does catch his eye: skin fragments. After spending the day deep cleaning, he feels like he's finally put a dent in it, but he wakes up in the night to dust falling from above and filling his mouth. His room is now covered like snow, and he looks closer at a clump of dust. It's full of tiny wriggling worms. Disgusting. He's had enough and tries to leave, but it seems his door is jammed from dust buildup. He looks up at the ceiling and sees the dust accumulating in the shape of a body and what looks like the face of the old man. He recalls the last part of the conversation he had with the man when he said he's glad someone will notice him when he kicks the bucket. He'll just have to think of a sign. We get a closer look at the disturbing face formed of dust and worms and the man looking up in terror. After the story, Yuma mentions what happened yesterday again, saying that the pencil, it sure looked like it hurt. He stops and looks back where we can hear someone crying out from the hall in pain. Yuma says it hurt for him too. Story 22, Pretend Not to Notice. Yuma says it's Friday and he'll be here soon, so let's get going with the story. I wonder who he is. Anyway, a little boy and his mother are walking down the street when they pass a strange humanoid creature. The boy says that ever since he was little, he's seen grotesque monsters that no one else could see. He learned that his grandmother could also see these monsters, and she told him the best way to deal with them is to pretend that they're not there. These things were never human, and paying attention to them gives them strength. The monsters stand around them staring, but slowly they fade away. Following his grandma's advice, the boy grows up, and though he sees the creatures regularly, ignoring them does the trick. Now a teenager, the kid takes a girl to the movies when he's annoyed about the tall person blocking his view. His girlfriend has no idea what he's talking about, and he realizes too late that it's one of the creatures and he just gave it some attention. It looks like a huge woman with a stretched out body, and it suddenly rips its own head off. He runs out of the theater to his grandma's house, which is filled with the creatures. She calms him down and they slowly disappear once again. Eventually his grandmother died, and while mourning his loss, one of the creatures appears wearing the grandma's face. For a moment he's excited and then realizes it's a trick, and the creature rips his grandma's face in half. He looks away at first, but then enraged he starts to attack the creature. Of course, this interaction only draws more creatures in, and soon he's surrounded. Yuma turns the lights out and runs towards the bed, but is stopped by the shadowy figure from before, who grabs him and yells at him, "You hurt your stepmother, didn't you?" He demands that Yuma apologize as he grabs him by the neck and drags the boy out of the room. Okay, well, this gives us a lot more information. It seems the shadow is not a ghost, but Yuma's father, and the woman is actually his stepmom. It's sad to think that Yuma being so scared in his house isn't because of the supernatural, but rather his terrifying, abusive father. Story 23. merry-go-round. Yuma sits silently for a moment and we can see bruises all over his arms. Then he starts the next story. A father and his young girl stop by a carousel where she asks for one last ride. He tells her it's okay, and so excited, she runs to climb up on a horse, but slips. Though we don't see what happens, we can hear a terrible bang, and it seems that the fall was fatal. It jumps ahead a little, and we now see the father in mourning and drinking heavily. Finally, he decides to pay his respects to his daughter by leaving flowers at the carousel, which is now out of commission. When he arrives, he notices something strange, one of the horses crumbling. He walks onto the platform when it starts spinning and eerie music plays. For a moment, he thinks he sees his daughter running amongst the horses, and it starts spinning faster. Soon, he sees the dark shadow of his daughter riding a horse, and with a demented face, she tells him to get out. He apologizes to her for being careless and letting her die that day, but soon the faces of the horses morph into unsettling humanoid shapes, and they all shout at him to get out. He then trips on a crack and tumbles off the platform, landing against the railing as the entire thing collapses. A maintenance worker sees him and pulls him out, saying he's lucky he didn't just die. This thing has been on the brink of collapse for a while now. Looking at the wreckage, the father realizes his daughter was just trying to save his life. As Yuma finishes the story, his mother peeks into the room, wondering why he's talking to himself. He walks toward her and apologizes for stabbing her hand, but she just screams at him to stay away. She then seemingly talks to her husband, telling him that something is wrong with the boy, and that she believes something's in there with him. Yuma simply smiles and says goodnight. Story 24. Beneath the Mask. For the first time, Yuma tells the ghost story from a different location. He says thank God they didn't find you, and it seems he's now set up in the closet. A woman named Momoko takes the same route home after work every day. She walks through the rain and passes a strange woman sat with her head down. As she passes, the woman rapidly approaches her and is wearing a creepy face mask. She claims to be Kokomo's mother and calls her by name. It does sound like her, though her voice is muffled from the mask, but what a strange circumstance to find her in. Well, the woman says that some kids played a prank on her, asking her to wear this mask that actually had glue on the inside, and now it's stuck to her face. Kokomo's pretty suspicious about the whole thing. Why didn't she call someone or head straight home? The woman says she left her phone at the house, and without her glasses, she can't get very far. Kokomo also notices her shoes are missing, and the woman claims they fell off as she climbed the cliffside nearby. It's all very suspicious. Well, Kokomo offers to walk her home, but is completely thrown off when the woman thanks her and says she's just like her father. Kokomo is nothing like her father and demands that the woman say her father's name. Now she really starts to question the whole thing. Who is this woman? The woman grabs her and tells her to calm down, but Kokomo is starting to freak out, noticing how wrinkly and veiny the woman's hands are. Her mother's hands aren't like that, are they? Finally, she starts trying to pull the mask off to see if it really is her mom, and the woman is clearly in pain. She trips and goes falling off the side of the cliff. Kokomo looks down and doesn't see anything, and gets the idea that she can just call her mother's phone. Her father picks up and confirms that her mom did leave the phone here. He asks if Kokomo knows where she's gone to, and at the bottom of the cliff, we see her dead mother bleeding out from the mask. As the story finishes, Yuma's mom opens the closet door and drops some food on the floor before slamming it. Seems that this is some kind of punishment. Story 25. The Boastful Old Woman. Outside the closet, Yuma hears the doorbell ring and footsteps move across the house. This buys him some time to tell the next story. A little boy and girl walk home from school when they pass a really creepy old lady outside her house in a wheelchair. Her eyes and mouth are all blacked out. I can't tell if it's because she's missing her eyes and teeth or her wrinkly skin just obscures them. The boy tells the girl not to pay attention to her. She just sits there all day waiting for people to talk to her. The old lady hears them and says she doesn't just sit here all day. In fact, every day she goes wherever she wants, insisting that she even went to Mount Fiji yesterday. The girl argues that's impossible, and the boy tells her not to engage with the lady and that there are rumors that she kidnaps kids. They start walking away when the old woman starts listing items: a heart-shaped clock, a white teddy bear, and star pattern curtains. These all happen to be features of the little girl's room. Freaked out, she asks how the old woman knows about that stuff, and the lady says she followed her home the other day. The little girl yells at her that she's making this all up. There's no way she could have done that in her condition, but the old woman reveals how. She says she uses astral projection, a technique to remove the soul from the body. You can then travel wherever you want. That night, the girl tries it herself, and remarkably, it works. Her soul leaves her body body and she flies to the old woman's house to tell her that she's done it. Here she finds the old woman is outside of her body as well, and she's surprised. None of the other children, she's told, have been able to do this. They go back to the girl's room to look at her body, and the old woman tells the girl she should have never left her body out in the open like this. Otherwise, someone could steal it. As she says this, she reaches into the girl's body and her spirit seems to fuse with it. The next day, the little girl and boy are walking to school when they pass the old woman, who looks at the girl and sadly says, "Give it back." The little girl tells the boy she's just an old liar, and they walk away smiling. It seems the old woman has snatched the little girl's body, forcing the little girl to live in an old, dying body. The story ends and the doorbell rings several more times until finally Yuma's stepmom answers it. It looks like Hina stopped by to drop off some homework for Yuma, and hearing her voice, Yuma yells out and starts clawing and pounding on the closet door. Hina clearly hears him calling out, and his mother, playing it off, says she'll go get him. And that is the end of chapter 25. Story 26, Scrounging Up Change. After school, Yuma and Hina come back to Yuma's room and she's surprised that he invited her this time. Usually it's the other way around. He requests another ghost story from her, which leads us to the 26th story. We see a kid scrounging around under a vending machine. A coin is just out of his reach when a stick comes in from the other side and pushes it out. Looks like this was the boy's best friend, and they spend a lot of their time looking under machines like this for loose change. Today they're not getting a very good haul, and the kid with the stick scrapes it around in vain. He manages to pull something out, and the kids are shocked to see a 1,000 yen note, a much bigger prize than what they typically find. This rejuvenates their search, and they desperately look around for anything else they can find. One of the boys says he's been saving up his money for a soccer ball, then he's gonna practice hard and become a pro to make real money. The other kid says he already spent all of his half on food. It's pretty sad actually. He says his dad works all day and is never home. There used to be food in the fridge, but it eventually ran out. His friend feels bad and says that they'll search extra hard tomorrow. The next day they get another pretty good haul when the starving boy says that his friend should take all of it. He'll just spend it all immediately. But his friend can get the soccer ball and he'll have that forever. He insists that he buy the ball, and so they make a deal to share it. A week goes by and we see many flowers outside of the starving boy's home. His friend sees him scrounging under the vending machine like usual and is happy to find him, since everyone else has been saying he's dead. The kid just ignores him and then crawls under the machine completely in an unnatural way, repeatedly saying the phrase, "I can't get it." Then he slowly pops out of the other side with a cringe-inducing scraping noise. His friend is pretty shocked at what he saw, but tries to show his friend the new soccer ball that he just bought and even hands it to him. However, it just drops right through the boy's hands. It seems the boy ended up starving to death, and his ghost is stuck scrounging for change endlessly. Pretty sad. After the story, Yuma thanks Hina for coming by yesterday, saying she really saved his skin. There's a loud knock on the door, and Yuma's stepmom has brought them a snack. Story 27, Transfiguration. Yuma walks into his room to find his stepmom spraying some cleaner. She coldly says that she cleaned his room, and we can see her hand is still bandaged from the pencil incident. Once she leaves, Yuma is relieved to see the camera, or whatever he's talking to, is still there and begins the next story. A man named Naoya rolls out of bed and soon tells the woman he was sleeping with to get out since his actual girlfriend is coming over. She's understandably pissed and storms out, slamming the door behind her. Just as she leaves, Naoya sees something strange in the hallway, a very faint, dark shadow. The doorbell rings and his girlfriend Miho comes in, who he greets with a smile as if he wasn't just banging some other chick in here. He asks her if she sees the black cloud in the hallway, and she has no idea what he's talking about. After a short visit, Miho says she can't sleep over because she's got to get up early. Just before she leaves, Naoya sees the cloud again, and now it's a little darker and has taken on the vague shape of a human. He grabs Miho and turns her around to look at it, but once again she doesn't see anything and leaves, walking right past it. Naoya is sufficiently freaked out now and wonders if he's hallucinating. Some time passes and he peeks out into the hall to see the shape has gotten clearer, and now the feet and hands of a person have formed. It seems to be a woman, and her long hair is draped over her face. The figure cranes her neck and looks up at him. Her hair parts, and we see she has no face. Naoyo freaks out and shuts himself in his room. He calls up Miho and tells her that he needs to move immediately. Apparently, she was the one who rented the place to him, and he asks if anyone died in here before he moved in. She completely ignores his scared ramblings and bluntly asks him if he's hiding something from her. What has he been doing in the room she's renting him? She says she knew something was up at her visit yesterday and needs time to think about things. Then she hangs up on him. Desperate, Naoyo then calls up his side piece and asks if he can crash at her place tonight. She's still pissed about the way he kicked her out, but he says it's an emergency and explains the whole ghost situation going on in the hallway. She tells him that the dark figure is actually her wrath incarnate, all the anger she feels for him given form. Just then, his room door begins to open and he completely flips out. The girl says she was just kidding and he was the one who started the ghost story. While she laughs it off, Naoyo looks mortified. The ghostly woman has entered his room and is reaching out toward him. He finally sees her face and it's Miho. It seems this is wrath incarnate, but of his girlfriend for cheating on her. She wraps her hands around his neck and the story ends with a squeezing sound. Yuma then looks around his room. He panics and starts frantically searching for something that seems to have gone missing. He runs out of his room and we hear his mother saying, "What, that stuffed animal of yours? I threw that thing out." Well, that's messed up. She actually threw away Umaken. Story 28. Can't you see her? Yuma is shaking and crying until he finally sits down at his desk, clutching a pencil. He says it doesn't matter what he does, it doesn't change a thing. Then he begins the story. A man named Higashi-sama sits at his wife's side as she passes away in the hospital. He cries out in tears, begging her not to leave him. We jump ahead a bit, and Higashi-sama wakes up from his bed to the doorbell ringing. Oddly, his wife still seems to be alive. From under the covers, she asks him to grab the door. It turns out to be a psychic medium he hired named Hikawa. He sits her down and pours some tea when Hikawa's eyes go wide looking at the teacup. Though we don't see why, and she quickly moves on, asking for more details about his situation. He tells her that his wife, Shizuka, had a chronic illness, and 2 years ago she died in the hospital. He could hardly bear it, living completely alone and looking over at her empty bedside. One night he couldn't take it anymore and stuffed the blanket with pillows, pretending she was still there. For the first time in a while, he slept like a baby. After that, he kept living this way, pretending she was still there and even setting the table for two. Then, one night, Shizuka spoke to him, telling him good night. Day by day, she spoke more and more until finally she took shape and started to move. Higashi-sama thought it was all in his head, but then she started singing songs he'd never heard before and making meals he'd never eaten. He says to the medium, "This is way beyond the bounds of delusion, right?" He believes his desire was so strong he actually brought her back to life. He called up Hikawa because he knew a medium of her caliber would be able to see Shizuka. He then walks over to the bedroom door and opens it, where his beautiful wife steps out and introduces herself. Hikawa just stares blankly for a moment and then says she doesn't see anyone, and in fact, doesn't feel any supernatural energy coming from this place. She tells him bluntly that he's living a fantasy and just seeing what he wants to see. She starts to see herself out when Higashi-sama asks her why she's lying. Furthermore, he can prove it. He notes that Hikawa never drank her tea, most likely because of the long dark hair that he put in it. Well, the hair belongs to Shizuka. How could she see the hair and not see the woman it belongs to? Shizuka then pulls a knife out on Hikawa, who's scared to death. The blade gets inches from her face, and finally, she pushes the ghost woman away, confirming that she does see her. Higashi-sama starts thanking her for confirming the truth, that his wife has truly come back to life. Though, in one last panel, we see the reality. Higashi-sama is alone and talking to himself. Not only is his wife not back, he made up Hikawa too. A cope within a cope. Yuma ends the story and his stepmom tells him to go to bed. He sadly asks about his horsey and she throws a doll for him to have instead. It's a shittier version of Umaken, and enraged he chucks it at the wall. Story 29, Passing On. Yuma says he doesn't want anyone or anything standing in his way again, and clutches a sharp pencil in his fist before starting the 29th story. This one starts on a pretty interesting page. A boy named Hiroto stares at a photo of himself sat upon his own memorial. I guess he recently died, and it's always nice to see one of these stories from the ghost perspective. Well, his parents are of course devastated, especially his mother, who can't stop crying. Hiroto seems at peace though and says he had a good life, however short. His father then lights some incense for him, and this has the opposite effect on the boy's ghost, who can't stand the stench. While Hiruto's father tries to get his wife to eat something, the ghost is freaking out about the incense and finally crushes it with his hand to put it out. His parents look over in shock, and his mother claims that his spirit must be angry. She firmly believes that Hiruto is still in this house and worries that he'll be stuck here forever. Finally, they decide to try and use some salt to sanctify the place. They both take a handful to throw around the room, unknowingly speckling their son's ghost in the process. Unfortunately, this also has a negative effect, as Hiruto's skin starts burning from the salt. It's pretty hard to look at. He screams out and grabs his face, bumping into the altar and knocking over some glass. His parents are fully convinced that his spirit is angry and can't find peace, and decide to hire a professional cleanser. Meanwhile, poor Hiruto is curled up on the ground, begging his parents to stop. Soon an exorcist comes to cleanse the place, and the burned Hiruto starts feeling woozy. His parents pray that he rest in peace, but Hiruto begs them to stop the man, and soon he erupts in flames. He asks why they're sending him away. He wants to stay here. And before fully disappearing, we see his severely disfigured and burned face crying. Once the service is complete, his parents comment about how he must be happy now, and that's where the story ends. My God, that's one of the most fucked up stories so far. From their perspective, they think they're helping their kid pass on, and instead they basically torture him and force him to leave in agony. As the story wraps up, a man enters Yuma's room, and we can assume that this is his father, although unlike before, he looks more like an actual man instead of an ambiguous dark figure. Yuma shakes violently and holds his pencil out like a weapon, telling him to stay back. His father easily snatches the pencil and pushes Yuma down before flipping his desk over. Man, we're going through all these ghost stories, and the scariest thing about this manga is the very real abuse that Yuma is suffering. Just a little note here, but if you look closely in the corner of the last panel, you can make out a drawing by Yuma of him holding hands with a woman. Maybe this is his real mom? Story 30, Teke Teke. Yuma is still pretty sad about Umakin being thrown away and sits down at his desk. It looks like he has a black eye, or at least a bruised cheek. Anyway, he starts the next story. A teacher is grading some papers when she comes across a weird drawing by one of her students. He wrote, "I saw Teke Teke after class, everybody watch out." Although instead of the typical image of Teke Teke who's missing her legs, this one is missing her arms. The teacher discusses this with one of her colleagues, and they talk about the urban legend. This is actually a classic Japanese story about a girl who was hit by a train, cutting her in half. She then went on to haunt people by the tracks, chasing them to find her missing legs. The name Teke Teke comes from the sound of her palms hitting the pavement as she chases you. Pretty creepy. The teacher calls out the student for getting the story wrong and gets back to grading papers. Eventually, she's the last one left at the school and hears a knocking outside the window. It's a pretty creepy picture as whoever's knocking leans into the window and says she's looking for her legs. Considering the doodle she just saw, this is pretty terrifying. But before the teacher can engage with the woman, the maintenance man comes in and she vanishes. He says he's just making his nightly rounds and sees the Teke Teke drawing on her desk. This takes the old guy back as he remembers that legend being passed around the school years ago. Finally, the teacher starts to head home, but when she walks out into the dark hallway, she hears a pattering sound at one end of the hall. She decides to go the other way, but the sound increases and soon white hands come crawling out of the darkness. She looks back, fully expecting to see Teke Teke crawling toward her, but instead, the woman is actually standing and armless, just like the drawing. She cries out, asking for her legs, and runs at the teacher. We finally get a full look at the woman, and it seems the boy's drawing was completely accurate. This Teke Teke is missing her legs, but her arms have been cut off and attached to where her legs were. It's a horrifying image seeing the woman run on her hands like that. She looks like a creature from Silent Hill. I gotta say, it's a pretty fresh take on an old story. Yuma finishes up the tale and goes to bed. Later that night, a scream can be heard somewhere in the house and Yuma's door opens. And probably the freakiest thing to happen in Yuma's room yet, a full-blown horse walks into his room with black eyes. It sniffs Yuma in his sleep and then walks toward his desk. This thing looks scary as hell, and it opens its mouth to show human-like teeth with hair stuck in them. What the hell? Well, that was the end of Volume 3, and I guess they wanted to end it on a creepy note. Story 31, At Home. Yuma comes into his room all smiles, showing off Umakin, who he says came back to him. Apparently, Yuma woke up and Umakin was in his bed. He's obviously really happy to see his stuffed companion and moves into the next story. Does this have anything to do with the dark horse entity that came into his room the night before? Anyway, let's get into the story. A young man named Seki takes the only job he can get, helping out a business owner by cleaning his office space. He plans on finding a better job as soon as possible, but for now, this'll have to do. It isn't all bad, as the owner agreed to pay Seki daily. At the end of the day, the man gives him an envelope, and Seki is shocked to find how much money he's paying him for today's work. He's about to head out when the man starts looking at his printer. He claims it's not working and blames it on Seki before snatching his pay right out of his hands. Seki insists that he didn't do anything to break the printer and reaches for it when the man stops him by jabbing his pen into Seki's hand. That's a little drastic. Seki says he really needs that money though, or he'll be evicted from his apartment. The owner feels bad and tells him he can stay in a small room in the back for free as long as he's working for him. He unlocks the door for Seki and then takes his phone, saying he can't have any company secrets leaking. I mean, come on, that's a massive red flag. But Seki doesn't really have any other options, so he goes along with it. Plus, a free room and a paid gig isn't bad. He enters the room and notices something is a little off, like the fact that there are scratches all over the inside of the door. The weeks go on and Seki has barely made enough money for food on account of his boss constantly accusing him of breaking things in the office and docking his pay. Finally, Seki tells the owner he'd like to resign, but the man says he can't let him do that. Once you add up all the broken items, rent, utilities, and food, Seki owes him a lot of money. Man, I hate this guy. That night, the owner locks Seki's room from the outside in case he tries to leave without paying him off. In tears, Seki laments the fact that he left his parents' house on bad terms, and on top of that, he's disappointing his boss. The owner enters the room with Seki's phone and says he just talked to his parents to discuss the debt. He tells Seki that his parents told him that he's not welcome back home. At this point, Seki falls to his knees shaking. He's starving, exhausted, and failing at every turn. It seems he's hit his breaking point. The man leans over to comfort him, saying he can always rely on him, and as long as he does hard work, things will work out. He even goes as far as to tell Seki to call him his new father. Creepy. Well, 6 months pass, and the owner tells Seki he's done a good job. In fact, he considers his debt paid off. But the poor kid, now looking sickly and malnourished, goes into a panic, saying he'd like to stay and that he has nowhere else to go. He offers to work for free if he has to and begs the man to let him stay. The owner tells him of course he can stay. What father would he be to turn away his own son? And in the final panel, we get one more look at the room door, all scratched to hell. This one was pretty interesting because it wasn't supernatural or even overtly scary, but rather a psychological horror. Yuma finishes up the story and there's a knock at his door. It's a police officer and he asks Yuma about what happened last night when his mother was attacked. Yuma says he didn't hear anything as he was sleeping, and the officer reassures him that that's perfectly fine. Story 32. That day. Yuma seems to be cutting something up with scissors, but we don't get a good look at what it is. He finishes and sits down to tell story 32. It begins with an ad on TV for a futuristic looking watch called the K924. Apparently, it can send you to the past, but it's a one-way trip. The ad says they're expected to start rolling out the watch in 8 years. A woman named Aoi watches the TV and says that this device has been all the buzz online. Her husband, Kanata, walks by and storms out of the house in a huff. She wonders what's wrong and he says she knows why he's mad before slamming the door. Oddly, immediately after he leaves, he seems to come right back inside, only wearing a completely different outfit. Kanata looks happy to see his wife and gives her a huge hug, telling her they need to talk. He sets a watch down on the table. In fact, it's a K924. He then dramatically tells her that he's from 6 years in the future where he managed to get a watch early and come back to this time. Aoi figures he's just messing with her, but he proves it by asking her to call his phone. She does just that and Kanata picks up. He yells at her that he's at the office and to quit bugging him. She starts to believe future Kanata now, but wonders why come back to today. He tells her it's because she's going to die tonight, and that's why he came back, to get her before it happens. She suggests that they tell his past self about it, but Kanata says he's the one who kills her. Apparently, he saw her talking to another man who was just a client, but he started to assume she was cheating. This suspicion and jealousy has built up to today. Aoi then asks the pertinent question, if he's the same Kanata from the future, Doesn't that mean he killed her? Before he can answer, the past Kanata comes home early. He immediately spots another man's shoes, and this confirms his suspicions. At least he thinks so. He rounds the corner to find his future self holding a kitchen knife. Kanata tries to convince his past self that he's from the future, but quickly realizes nothing he can say will change his mind. The past Kanata, in his rage, assumes that Aoi's lover is just wearing a mask to mock him. That's quite a stretch. Well, the two men wrestle each other until the knife is knocked to the ground and the past Kanata picks it up, then slashes Aoi down the middle, sending blood spraying across the room. He follows up by stabbing his future self in the chest. As future Kanata bleeds out, he hands his past self the watch and says, "It's his turn now. Please don't fail again." And that wraps up the story. Probably the wackiest story so far, but I think that's because it was a straight up sci-fi, which we haven't really seen. Yuma finishes up the story and we finally see what he was cutting up. His stepmom's belongings. He says she's in the hospital and no one will know. Everyone will assume it's the attacker who did it. It seems he's getting revenge for what she did to Umaken. Story 33, Blink of an Eye. Yuma listens in on a conversation between two cops doing an investigation. One officer says that the attacker didn't seem to take anything and that if he had to guess, he would say they had a grudge against the woman. Yuma then moves to his desk and says it looks like they haven't found the attacker yet, not that that matters to him, and he starts the next story. It starts on an ominous page of a man in a hat and raincoat covering his eyes. We then see two high school kids walking home when one of them sees the man standing by the road and repeating the words, "Don't look, don't look." The kid mentions the strange man and how lately he's seen him standing by the crosswalk all day long and repeating those same words. As you might have guessed by the nature of this manga, his friend doesn't see the man. As they discuss this, the kid steps out onto the road and narrowly avoids getting hit by a van. His friend says he better watch out. A little girl was run over at the crosswalk recently, and it was a gruesome scene apparently. The next day after school, the kid is walking home alone this time, when, like usual, he sees the man covering his eyes and chanting, "Don't look." He pretends the guy isn't there and looks towards the street instead. But when he does, the creepy guy reaches out for him, knocking him to the ground. The kid looks up and can't help but see the man's face. His eyes are clawed out of his head, and he's sticking his own fingers into the holes, screaming, "Keep your eyes off my daughter." It's terrifying. In this moment, we get a flashback and discover that this man is the father of the girl who was killed. He came upon the scene where her body was absolutely mutilated in the street. Soon, passerby all gathered around and started taking out their phones. The father crouched over his daughter and yelled out for them to stop looking. In the present, the kid tries again to look away, inadvertently gazing at the crosswalk. This makes the man berserk, and he grabs the kid by the face, digging his fingers into his eyes. It's one of the most disturbing panels in this whole comic. It makes me squirm to see the dude's fingers going under the kid's eyelids. Yuma ends the story and crawls into bed, but the police are still in the house. They mention that the footsteps lead up to Yuma's room and then disappear, but this isn't a crime a little kid could pull off. Either way, they'll need to search his room thoroughly in case they miss something. In the last panel, one of the officers opens Yuma's door and says they need to speak with him again. Story 34, Ghost Extermination. Yuma and Hina come into his room after school and he apologizes that it's so hot. He opens a window and then offers to tell her a ghost story. In the story, a young pest exterminator named Niwa is starting a new job today. His boss informs them that they won't be exterminating bugs, but rather ghosts. They head to the first job, where the owner of a house has been hearing unusual noises. Niwa asks if they need to call an exorcist or something, but his boss is really casual about it, saying, "Nah, it's just a routine pest control job." They get to the house and the boss immediately hears noises. Niwa doesn't hear anything, but his boss thinks he'll become more spiritually perceptive over time. He opens the balcony door to an empty rocking chair and says that there's an old man in it. The boss then pulls out a baseball bat and gives the chair a big whack, afterwards asking Niwa for some rope. He ties several rope loops across the floor and says it's time for dissection and cleanup. Niwa's like, what the hell is going on here, but goes along with it anyway. His boss gives him a big saw to start supposedly cutting up the ghost, and he just awkwardly chops at the air. He assumes this is just a big scam for gullible customers, and they move on to the next location. On the drive, Niwa says he can't believe people actually buy into this stuff. Plus, if he was really chopping the old man up, wouldn't that be murder? His boss laughs and says it can't be murder if they're already dead. They arrive at the next house where they learn that the young woman who was living here died in a car accident and seems to have returned as a ghost. Come to think of it, didn't the girl in the very first ghost story of this manga die in an accident and then come back as a ghost? I don't think it's connected, but had to mention it. Anyway, Niwa gets really cold as they enter the house, and soon the boss says he's found her, pulling out his bat and whacking the air. This time, Niwa actually does see something, like a shadow being struck by the bat, and he hears a cry. Once again, the boss ties up the ghost and tells Niwa to start the dissection. Niwa starts sawing like last time, only now he can feel pressure on the blade and a sick grinding noise. He hears a terrible scream and for a half second looks down to see the ghostly figure as he saws off her head. He drops the saw and shakes violently, saying he can't continue to do it. His boss tells him that ghosts are pests like any other bug and need to be stopped from disrupting our lives. He picks up the saw and callously finishes the job as the ghost woman's cries echo through the house. The story ends and Hina picks up Umakin, finding something that looks like blood on his snout. Yuma grabs the doll from her, and at the same time the police are here again, asking to have a look around the room. Before Yuma lets them inside, he instructs Hina to climb out the window and run home, and to bring Umakin with her. It seems he doesn't want the cops to find the doll. Story 35, Happy Birthday. While Yuma's at school, we see who I can only assume is his stepmom peering into the room with a neck brace on. She says, "Umakin's in this room, and I'll drive him out." At least in the official English translation. In the fan translation online, she seems to be speaking jumbled nonsense, which is way creepier in my opinion. Anyway, Yuma comes home from school and starts the 35th ghost story. A woman sits watching TV when she hears her daughter call out from the other room saying she's home. The woman looks out into the hall, but no one's there, and her daughter calls out from the bathroom saying she just couldn't hold it. The mother assumes her daughter Aki has come home to visit her since it's her birthday. Aki confirms this and wishes her mom happy birthday, then asks if she would make her some miso soup. Her mom is surprised she didn't ask for one of her favorites instead. The daughter then says that it's not only her mother's birthday, but also the anniversary of Natsu's death. Apparently Natsu is Aki's older sister, and her mother says that she would rather not talk about her. Aki continues the conversation though, asking if her mother still hates Natsu, and we start to learn the uncomfortable family dynamics. Right before marrying Aki's mom, Natsu's father revealed he had a daughter with another woman. So right from the start, she didn't like the girl. She says that Natsu was a handful at work and school, and eventually her father abandoned them but left Natsu in her care. When Natsu passed away, she actually felt relieved, but she never imagined that the girl would commit suicide on her birthday just to spite her. Aki speaks up saying, "Didn't Natsu die in a car accident though?" Her mother then argues that she had to have done it on purpose, just to make her life worse. Now all of her birthdays are overshadowed with gloom. Aki, still talking from the bathroom, says she thinks Natsu really loved her though, and suggests that her mother changed after Aki was born, only showing love to her blood child and neglecting Natsu, who acted out just to get a little bit of her attention. Every year Natsu would even buy her mother flowers, the only thing she ever seemed to do right. The day she died, she was hit by a car while on her way to buy flowers. The mother starts looking pretty uncomfortable, and finally her daughter steps out from the bathroom. Only it's not Aki, but the ghost of Natsu. She says that Aki would never visit her because she doesn't care as much, but Natsu does. She starts singing happy birthday to her mom as blood drips from her body and pools on the floor. The mother asks why she resents her, and Natsu says she doesn't resent her, she just wants to celebrate with her mother. Finally, the mom breaks into tears and tells the truth. She knows how hard Natsu tried to show her love, and tells her she can go free now. Immediately, Natsu vanishes, and a bouquet of flowers falls to the floor where she stood. That wraps up the story, and Yuma heads to the bathroom. While he's gone, we see a mysterious hand reach into his room and scatter something onto the floor. When Yuma gets back, it's kind of weird. His room fogs up and he looks to the floor in a panic. I really don't know what's going on here. Story 36, Defiled. Yuma comes into his room and shuts off the light. He seems like he's out of breath as he hides under his desk and starts the next story. A teenager named Satoru lives with his grandpa. His family moved in with the old man because they were worried about him living on his own, and shortly after, Satoru's parents died in quick succession. Now it's just him and his gramps, but he's taken care of, and his grandpa always gives him plenty of food to eat. Satoru claims he's never seen his grandpa look sad, even when his parents died, which, come to think of it, is a little weird. One day, Satoru walks into the kitchen and finds his grandpa doing something kind of strange. He's picking malformed pieces of rice out of the bag and placing them in jars. Satoru quietly follows his grandpa as he places the jar in a cabinet full of them. Later, his grandpa says he must be ready for a snack by now and gives him some more rice. After eating the rice, Satoru suddenly starts shaking and looks down at his arm to find that it's forming hundreds of small rice-like bumps. He starts panicking and his grandpa says there's no stopping it now. He then reveals what he's been doing all of this time. He's been separating out what he calls defiled rice and collecting it. This is rice that was made on polluted farms, but mixed in with regular rice. Typically, it's such a small amount that it doesn't do any harm. But what if you ate only defiled rice? We get a creepy look at one of the jars where the small grains of rice almost look like they have tortured human faces on them. Satoru has been eating this rice the whole time, fed to him by his grandpa, who only ever wanted to be alone. Now he can live out his days in peace by himself. In a strange body horror climax, Satoru's body keeps changing, bulging out and turning into rice, killing him. Kinda reminds me of the corn ramen story from Bad Dreams in the Night. Yuma ends the story and his door pops open. He slowly crawls out from his desk and starts to close it when suddenly a voice yells out at him. He runs to hide back under his desk and a large shifting figure barges into the room. Is this one of his parents, an entity of some kind? I don't know, but it's terrifying. Story 37, Roaming Head. An officer tells Yuma to wait in his room for a bit, and Yuma complains that the cop is always doing what he wants, walking around here like he owns the place. Then he starts the next story. A woman tells her husband about a strange burial site where criminals' remains were buried after they were beheaded. It's right next to her friend's house, and she hates having to walk past it, especially because of the urban legends about the buried heads coming to life and roaming around to find a new body. Her husband makes fun of her for being scared and hopes she has fun with her friend while he stays home and watches the baby. Later that night, the wife is running pretty late on her way home. Worried, the husband takes the baby out on a walk to look for her. While out, he passes by a person that looks an awful lot like her, but when he turns her around, it's actually a man with greasy hair and a battered face. He apologizes for mistaking the man for his wife, but when he looks at his neck, it looks as if it's been cut off and reattached. The person says nothing and hobbles away like a zombie when the husband recalls the urban legend about the heads. Freaked out, he goes ahead and calls his wife. I don't know why he didn't do that from the start, but anyway, sure enough, the strange man pulls a ringing phone out of the purse he's carrying and drops it. The husband picks it up and it is his wife's, confirming that he didn't mistake the body he saw, only the head. He follows the creature down an alley. It stumbles and falls, and at the same time, its head pops off the wife's body, spraying blood all over. Her husband breaks into tears and is frozen still as the body picks the strange head up and places it back on, only backwards. The man is terrified as his wife's body with a man's head walks backward toward him. Finally, he picks up a nearby glass bottle and smashes it on the head, knocking it off his wife's body once again. The head rolls off into the street, and the man looks down at the gruesome, twitching body of his wife, still gushing blood. As he stands crying over her body, he hears a noise coming from the baby stroller. Yep, don't forget he brought the baby with him. He sees the baby twitching in his carriage, obscured by the sun visor. He finally pulls it up to see a horrifying sight. The roaming head has now latched on to his child. Pretty fucked up, man. As Yuma finishes the story, the officer comes into his room to look around and peeks out Yuma's open window where he finds footprints. He climbs partway out and Yuma takes the opportunity to place his hands on the cop and push him. We hear him scream and a loud thud as he hits the ground. Story 38. Leaving the mountain. Yuma has Hina over again, and she asks if it's true that an officer fell from his window and got hurt. He just shrugs it off and asks her to tell another scary story. A teenager and his younger brother are hiking up the side of a mountain. The older brother is having trouble scaling a wall, and his brother tries to help him up, but instead is pulled off himself, tumbling down to the ground where his body is mangled and broken. The older brother rushes over to him crying when the kid just sits up perfectly fine. Still, the teen hugs him hard and tells him not to leave him again. Okay, that was weird. They continue their hike and the kid asks his brother why he's up here anyway, as he usually comes when something's on his mind. The teen regretfully informs him that he's going to be moving away soon, going to the city with his father. The kid just wishes him good luck as if it's no big deal. They eventually get back to the edge of the woods and a paved road, but the boy refuses to step foot on the pavement. The older brother tries to help him and the boy freaks out, saying not to pull him in. His brother pulls him anyway and the boy's hand rips off and crumbles to pieces. With black eyes and his arm missing, the kid tells his brother that he can't leave the mountain. It turns out that the boy is actually a ghost tied to the place of his death, where he actually did fall and die while hiking. His older brother walks away, realizing he'll never be able to see him again, and the boy tells him to take care. This one's not really scary, just sad. But it is a ghost story. Hina finishes the story and asks Yuma a few questions, like why was there blood on Umakin and why he's looked so down lately. She says he can't keep ignoring her about it and that she's involved at this point. The cops have even come to her house and asked her questions. She wants to help him and finally admits that she likes him. Story 39, The Dark Village. After school, Yuma tells Hina how happy he was about what she said yesterday. He tells her goodbye and starts the next story. A man traveling on foot stops by a rural village hoping to find a place to stay. A woman finally answers the door and tells him she can't let him stay outside alone and ushers him inside quickly. She says that most people in this village leave when summer rolls around, except for the elderly with no one to take them in. She warns him that this village is dead center in the path of the Scourers, whatever that means. She asks about the strange frog necklace he's wearing, calling it foolish, and he says his girlfriend gave it to him before his travels. She tells him he can stay in one of her rooms and warns him not to leave after sunset, saying the Scourers flock through here and he can't survive with them outside. He finally asks what a Scourer is, and the woman snaps on him, saying that they are what they are, but warns him he must never turn any lights on because they'll find him if he does. She tells him he ought to get rid of the frog necklace or he'll be a goner for sure. He's a little spooked, but figures the old woman is just a little batty. He decides to stay the night, and as the sun goes down, he finds the whole village has turned all their lights out. He wakes up in the middle of the night to loud rattling noises by his window. Then he looks up to see a giant eye gazing in at him. He freaks out until he gets a better look and realizes that it's only the pattern on the wing of a giant moth. It's the size of a cat and there's dozens of them outside of his window trying to get in. He doesn't understand why, as he turned off his phone and any other source of light in the room. That is until he remembers his necklace. His girlfriend put a solar powered light in it and it begins to glow as the moths get more aggressive, cracking the window. The man realizes what this means and looks at it with dread as the windows burst open and the moths eat him alive, leaving only a blood-soaked room. The story ends and Yuma's stepmother walks in, asking why he's having so much fun while she can't even move her neck. She then accuses him of doing it to her, as well as hurting the cop. She starts unraveling the bandage on her hand, and the pencil wound hasn't healed up. In fact, it looks pretty gross. She holds it up in front of Yuma's face and demands that he look at the festering hole. Damn. Story 40, Demon Worship. Yuma puts a band-aid on a bloody spot on his hand. Looks like his stepmother got a little revenge. He says Hina has a resilient heart, but this is something he must do on his own. He then moves into the 40th story. This one starts off with a very direct sentence. My girlfriend worships a demon. Okay, so I guess we're not messing around on this one. We see a man staring at his girlfriend who's shaking, and she asks him if he'll forgive her. From there, we get a flashback. Ryosuke and his girlfriend Yuka get along great, almost too well, as he starts finding her to be a little clingy. One day, he tells her politely that maybe she should find something to sink her time into. After this, Yuka fully applied herself to her new hobby and studied constantly. Finally, Ryosuke was curious and took a peek at what she was reading. Books about demonology. As he approached her, she started shushing someone, saying, "Quiet, he'll hear you." Creepy. Well, we jump back to the present, and Yuka admits that she summoned a demon through a mirror. She thought she could offer something small and hopefully get what she wants, but it took much more. She then shows her arm, which is missing a huge chunk of flesh. All she wanted was for it to grant her wish, to be happy on her own without relying on others. Yuka tells Ryosuke he should leave or he could be in danger, but he says he's got her back and that he'll help her. He feels bad for failing her and not noticing her suffering. So they come up with a plan. Ryosuke will call the demon out from the mirror again, and then Yuka will cut off its head with a knife. Ryosuke looks into the mirror as Yuka chants some devilish words. Finally, the reflection becomes uncanny, and a black-eyed version of Ryosuke sticks its head out. Ryosuke shouts for Yuka to hurry up and cut its neck, but she's got other plans. She laughs like a creep and reveals that she's only doing this because she loves him. In one last terrifying panel, Yuka says they can be happy together. As the demon expands out from the mirror, its face distorted and mouth full of several rows of teeth. Yuma ends the story and says his hand hurts and he's tired. He crawls into bed, and later in the night we see Hina crawl inside holding Umakin. She stands over Yuma and then turns her head smiling, her eyes completely blacked out. Story 41, Schrodinger. Yuma is cleaning his floor, saying it was all dirty for some reason and that it was probably that person again. Before he explains more, he starts the 41st story. Two childhood friends, a girl named Chiyo and a boy named Shigi, play one last game of hide and seek as Shigi is moving away tomorrow and they'll never be able to play again. Chiyo runs off to hide in the woods and really doesn't want to be found because if she is, they'll have to say goodbye. She finds an old thrown out fridge and decides to hide there. After some rigorous searching, Shigi finally comes upon the fridge and can hear Chiyo crying inside. Instead of opening it, he says he's sorry and leaves, not wanting to say goodbye either. Chiyo changes her mind and plans on chasing him down to see him one last time, but the fridge won't open and she's stuck inside. Now an adult, Shigi has moved back to his hometown. After unpacking, he goes for a walk down memory lane. As he passes by the woods, he remembers playing with Chiyo. After all this time, he never forgot about her. He walks through the woods when he sees the old fridge she was hiding in, and more surprisingly, the adult Chiyo appears, and she remembers him too. Shigi apologizes for not saying goodbye that day, but she understands he was actually just trying to be kind to her. He talks about how big they've both gotten and how she could never fit into the fridge now. But as he looks closer, she tells him not to open it. She talks about Schrodinger's cat, the old thought experiment where a cat is placed in a box that has a 50-50 chance of releasing gas. The only way to know if the cat was poisoned is by opening the box, which means the cat is both alive and dead at the same time until it's open. She looks pretty creepy as she asks him if he would still open the box. He just laughs it off, thinking she's messing with him, and opens the fridge to see something revolting. Chiyo's decayed, rotted corpse inside covered in maggots. He breaks into a sweat, but snaps out of it and realizes he never opened the box and this was only his imagination. He doesn't open the box after all and says he'll treat her to some ice cream, to which Chiyo replies, "You're too kind." It's a pretty interesting story because we actually don't know if this is really Chiyo or just her ghost. Did she die in the fridge or not? Yuma ends the story and said he's glad to have Umakin back and that Hina must have dropped him off last time she was here. The weird thing is, she wasn't at school today. There's a shuffling sound and wind blows through the curtains of the window, which Yuma swears wasn't open. Story 42, Scarecrow Town. The police officer who fell from the window is talking to Yuma, saying he's sorry if he spooked him, and Yuma says it's okay, he's glad the officer is fine. The cop then says he can always talk to him about anything. He leaves and Yuma starts the next story. It begins with a full-page panel of a creepy-ass scarecrow with a weirdly human-looking face. A boy says that these scarecrows are all over his town and it's even become known for it. The weird thing is, no one knows where they all came from. As the boy walks by a field, one of the scarecrows starts moving. But it's only a man carrying it and asking the boy if he could help. Apparently the guy is a groundskeeper and has been going around cleaning up the extra scarecrows. They carry it to a shack where several other scarecrows are stored and the man declares he'll get to the bottom of where they're all coming from. He thanks the kid for his help and sends him home. The boy walks into his house to find his father's favorite vase shattered on the floor. Apparently his dad went out and got it appraised, only to find it was worthless. This pissed him off, so he threw it on the ground. He wishes he never got it appraised in the first place and that some things are better left unknown. Walking home from school the next day, the kid passes near the shack with the scarecrows and finds one standing right in his path. He just passes by it, but when he turns to look at its face, it looks just like the man he helped yesterday. The realistic face on it is really creepy. Curious if the man made it himself, he looks into the shack where he finds a stack of books and notes. It seems that the guy really was researching it. One book is a collection of missing persons reports, and the kid recognizes 2 of the faces on the page, but doesn't remember where from. He suddenly realizes, and behind him we see 2 of the stored scarecrows are the spitting image of the missing people. He looks at some of the notes, and we only see a snippet from the groundskeeper that says, "I found out something I shouldn't have." As the boy reads on, his feet suddenly start twisting around violently, followed by the rest of his body. He cries out in agony as he transforms into a scarecrow and falls to the ground. I guess some things are better left unknown. After the story, the officer walks into Yuma's room again and sits on his bed, asking him if anything is bothering him. Yuma breaks into a sweat and clearly shifts his body to try and cover Umaken. The officer is friendly and stands up, asking if he's sure. As he gets closer to Umaken, Yuma responds a little harsher, and the chapter ends there. Story 43. The Backseat. Hina's back visiting Yuma after school, and it seems she's feeling better. Yuma asks about her leg, implying it's hurt, and Hina says she doesn't know how it got like that. We don't actually see it, but maybe it's badly bruised or something. Yuma then asks her if she'd tell him another story, and we're into number 43. We see a boy sitting at the back of a bus staring intently out the window. A girl gets on and says that she takes this bus every day and that the boy in the back died in a traffic accident last month. She's the only one who sees him, and she can't help but wonder what he's staring at. When he was alive, he would look at his phone or sleep. So what's he staring at now? There's not even anything interesting to look at outside. Why not look toward the front of the bus? She soon learns that the boy was killed when the bus driver fell asleep at the wheel. One day, instead of taking the bus, she walks home and wonders if maybe the boy is looking out longingly at school kids walking home. Maybe he misses the normalcy of it, as his soul is stuck riding the bus. She sees the bus she would normally have taken drive by, and of course the boy staring out the window. But now, from the outside, she sees the reason he doesn't turn his head. In an extremely disturbing image, the boy's left side has been ripped off of his body. A gruesome sight to end the story on. Hina finishes and apologizes to Yuma, saying she can't find Umaken anywhere and starts to tear up out of guilt. Yuma calms her down and pulls the doll out from under his blanket. He reminds her that she must have brought it over yesterday, but she doesn't remember doing it. Story 44. Scent. Yuma says it's Saturday and wonders if he'll be cleaning all day. This is because his room is completely trashed. Maybe from the cops searching it, maybe from his abusive parents destroying it, or maybe from a more supernatural reason. I really don't know at this point. Anyway, he gets into the 44th story. A man named Futa is in a hospital bed, clearly suffering a terminal illness. His girlfriend cuddles him and notes how sweet he smells, like a fragrant tea olive. Futa says he does that on purpose because he doesn't want to smell like a sick person around her. On a stranger note, he says that after he dies, he'll always stay by her side and protect her. So if she picked up the scent, she should be careful. This ends up being the last conversation they ever have, and the girl is distraught over his death. While walking down the street crying, she smells that fragrant scent that Futa was wearing. This stops her in her tracks, and right in front of her, a man on a balcony accidentally drops a pot which would have killed her. Later, she smells the scent again and narrowly avoids being hit by a speeding motorcycle. This continues to happen. Every time she smells Futa's fragrance, she barely avoids being killed. Now she realizes that Futa stood by his word and is still looking after her, using the smell to warn her of danger. It's a beautiful thing, but it's also heartbreaking, as she must stay away from the scent when she really wants to be close to him. One night, her storage closet opens up and the scent comes pouring out. The smell excites her and she runs into the closet thinking maybe he's there. Inside, some boxes containing knives fall from a top shelf and one slices her forehead open. As she bleeds, she feels dumb for almost getting herself killed so many times. But thank God that Futa's scent has kept her from dying. She then gets a thought. What if that's all backwards? What if when his scent approaches, it brings danger with it? We see fumes rise up from behind the shelf and the whole thing falls on top of her. It crushes her body, but she's barely living and thanks Futa once again. She looks up and sees a figure in the fumes. Futa's disturbing face peers out and asks, "Why won't you die?" It seems she did have it backwards all along. After the story, the cop enters Yuma's room, though his face is obscured, and he wonders why it's all messed up. Was it Yuma or someone else? He then tells Yuma that they can talk it out and he can help him get moved out of here. But Yuma slaps his hand away and the cop seems surprised by the force of it. Story 45. Kuchisake Onna. Yuma's stepmother enters his room and tells him that the cop is asking too many questions and that he better not tell him anything. She then says she's going out for a bit and to keep it down. Yuma walks over to his desk and begins the 45th story. This is another take on a classic Japanese urban legend, Kuchisake Onna, or the slit-mouthed woman. The old story tells of a slit-mouthed woman who wears a mask to hide her face. She's said to have long black hair and is beautiful other than the long scars on either side of her mouth. She asks her victims if she's beautiful. If they reply no, she'll kill them. And if they reply yes, she'll cut their mouths the same as hers. Anyway, that sets you up for this story. A businessman is walking to work when suddenly a woman with long dark hair wearing a mask starts following closely behind him. He panics thinking it's Kuchisake Onna and starts running until he enters a crowded walkway where everyone is wearing a mask but him. This story must take place during the COVID outbreak or just a heavy flu season. He tells his coworker what happened and he makes fun of the guy. Of course she was wearing a mask, so was everyone. What reason does he have to get so spooked? When he leaves work, the man looks around and doesn't see the woman anywhere. Relieved, he starts walking home, but sure enough, he hears footsteps rapidly approaching from behind and turns to see the same woman as before. He immediately starts running and trips, falling to the ground. When the woman asks him what's the matter, he gets a better look and she's actually really pretty. She asks him if something is wrong with her and he says of course not. She then takes the mask off and has a normal face, asking again if something is wrong. He says no and apologizes and starts walking away when she grabs him by the shirt. He turns around and finds that the laugh lines on her face have opened up into 2 more mouths. Pretty freaky and an unusual take on the classic character. As the story ends, Yuma hears the cop outside his room again asking to look around once more. He jumps into his bed and hides when the cop comes in. The officer ends up looking directly at us, and it's unclear still whether it's a camera or something else that Yuma is speaking to. But the cop has found it and starts reaching out when Yuma pops up and yells at him not to touch it. Story 46, Nesting Dolls. Yuma wipes off whatever it is he's talking to, cursing the cop for even touching it, and then begins the 47th story. A young teen is told to clean out his family's storage unit, where he finds a huge nesting doll. He inspects it and it splits open. Inside is only one much smaller doll that looks frightened. He figures the little one can stay, but lugs off the large shell to throw it away. As he walks away, he swears he can hear the little doll say it's cold, but assumes he's imagining it and tosses the larger doll in the garbage. Later, he awakes from a long nap and his stomach is rumbling. Even weirder, it's bulging as if he suddenly put on a ton of weight. He even stands on the scale and the number goes shooting up. His throat starts hurting too, and he takes a look in the mirror where he sees the small nesting doll peering out from his mouth. Now that's creepy. He figures he's just seeing things and should sleep the whole thing off, so he goes to bed early. Soon, he hears a loud knocking on his door and tells his mother she can just come inside. But after getting up, he realizes the knocking sound was coming from him. Even worse, he hears a small voice from his belly shouting, "Open up, open up." His stomach starts growing even more, and the kid grabs his face in agony as it seems to split down the middle. The next morning, his mother tries to wake him up, but he doesn't move. Finally, she rolls him over to find something horrifying. His body has split open, and the nesting doll, having grown in size, is nesting cozily inside of him. After Yuma ends the story, the cop comes back into his room, and he has a bandage on his arm. He says even though he fell out of the window without a scratch, he started to find bruises on his arm, and they seem to be spreading. As he speaks, we actually see them spread onto his hand. Story 47, Riding Duo. In a pretty surprising start to this chapter, the cop is sitting at the desk instead of Yuma. He says that one thing about his job is the task of protecting people, and in the process, you see what's important to them. He says he has no idea why Yuma's doing it though, and asks if it's fond of those things, it being whatever he's talking to. In a strange turn of events, he then tells the next story. Two friends are cruising on a bike, a boy named Ren driving and his friend Makoto hanging on the back. Ren isn't paying attention and runs a red light where a bus collides with the bike. He seems to be okay, but Makoto is completely mangled in the street in a splatter of blood. Later, we see Ren in shambles, and his mother says they're going over to Makoto's place. When they arrive, the boy's mother sits them down and gives them tea. She remembers the first day she met Ren and knew he would be a good friend to her son. Riddled with guilt, Ren breaks into tears, apologizing for robbing Makoto of his future. His mother apologizes too and says that it was Ren who caused the accident. Makoto's mother says not to apologize and that they're feeling the same pain she is. More so, she offers them to come over anytime they please. She walks over to Makoto's room saying that some of Ren's things are still inside, but Ren says to consider them gifts. They then enter the room, and surprisingly, we see Makoto is actually alive, though he's covered in casts and bandages as well as a breathing tube. Ren falls to his knees and begs for forgiveness, but then Makoto, barely able to speak, says he's sorry. Ren wonders why he would apologize, and we finally see the truth. Makoto is speaking to a memorial photo of Ren that his mother is holding. It was Ren who died in the accident, and we were only seeing his ghost. It's a great Sixth Sense style story where you can reread it and notice that no one actually addresses Ren directly. Pretty cool and sad. Yuma walks into the room and the cop asks how he liked his story. He doesn't reply, and the cop gets fed up, saying he's putting his body on the line for him, and if he doesn't want to talk when he comes tomorrow, he'll be moving on. Story 48. Black Sweater. Yuma's dad makes a rare faceless appearance and asks the boy if the cop hurt him. Yuma says no, but his father says don't worry, he'll chase the cop away. Yuma sits down and starts the 48th story. A boy recounts how his father abandoned him and his mother after a big fight. Afterwards, his mother began knitting a black sweater as a gift for her husband when he finally returns. The young boy asks if he'll stay this time, and his mother eerily says, "Next time, I'll never let him go." The years go on, and the mother continues knitting the sweater bit by bit until she's old. She finally finishes it, but her husband never returned. On her deathbed, she tells her now teenage son to get rid of the sweater, begging him to burn it. After her death, the son can't bear to get rid of it, as it's the only thing he has to remember her by. He puts the sweater on and it fits him perfectly. He can't understand why she wanted him to burn it. Then he notices a strand of hair has come off the collar. He doesn't think much of it, but soon he finds more. And more. It seems his mother made the sweater from her own hair, and the kid freaks out trying to pull it off. However, it's stuck on him, and more hair begins accumulating, sticking into his skin. It completely engulfs him, and we see the vengeful manifestation of his mother wriggling in the strands. It looks like she meant it when she said she would never let him go. Unfortunately, she got the wrong guy. Yuma's father comes back into his room and tells him that the cop is persistent. He tells Yuma that to keep him safe, he won't allow him to go outside anytime soon, and that he won't be going back to school for a while. Story 49. Loud Noise. Yuma is clearly on edge. He hears the slightest sound and turns around immediately, but it's nothing. He complains how he can't even relax in his own house and begins the next story. Students at a high school talk about the loud noise they keep hearing near the entrance, but no one can figure out where it's coming from. Up on top of the building, just above the entrance, is a student in tears. He says he can't go on suffering and that he's going to jump, intentionally doing it in such a public way because he wants everyone else to suffer too. He jumps and it all goes black. In the darkness of death, the kid begs to be able to see what happens afterwards, hoping to bask in his school suffering. He gets his wish and sees his class taking a moment to remember him. But instead of looking remorseful for how they treated him, they put on an act about how sad they are. His teacher, who told him to just grow up and deal with his own problems, says that everyone loved him. One student makes a big display about how he could have come to him with his problems, but in reality the guy was pretty mean to him. The same class that would endlessly mock him were now pretending to care that he died. Of course, the dead kid is pissed off at this farce. Finally, his parents arrive to pick his things up, and he can't wait to see them go ballistic. But instead of chastising the class, they apologize to the teacher for any inconvenience. None of this worked out the way he wanted, so he decides he'll have to do it again. We see him standing at the top of the school and then see several blood splatters as his ghost jumps over the edge over and over, hoping to make his death gruesome enough to get a better response. We hear some kids once again talk about the weird noise they keep hearing by the entrance, and in an absolutely gory final panel, we see dozens of the kids' corpses piling up around the school. Of course, this is unbeknownst to the living, who only hear the sound of his body hitting the ground. The story ends and Yuma hears a tapping on his window. He goes to check, but doesn't see anyone. As he sits back down, however, we can see a hand reach up. Story 50. Mistaken Identity. Yuma crawls out from under his desk and says that something is going to happen soon. He can feel it. He then moves on to the 50th story. Wow, I can't believe we've made it halfway. A man named Mayumi sees his friend Eri on the street, but she doesn't seem to recognize him. He tells her who he is, and she suddenly remembers him, then asks him to come with her, please. Back in her apartment, she says she's been possessed by a ghost. Ever since she was a kid, a ghost named Reiko has possessed her body. This was who Mayumi actually met. Lately, Reiko has possessed her more and more, and soon she's afraid that she'll have full control. She asks Mayumi to tie her up and force her to drink what she calls purifying water to drive the ghost out. And no matter what the ghost says, don't stop until it's empty. He goes ahead and helps her, tying her up and then force feeding her the purifying water. As he does, her eyes go all wonky and the dark liquid drips from her mouth. Suddenly, her eyes turn black and she says her name is Reiko and that Eri, the real ghost, is trying to take over her body. She insists that it's not purifying water, but actually poison. Mayumi remembers what Eri said, that the ghost would try and trick him, so he keeps making her drink the liquid despite her cries for him to stop. Finally, the bottle is empty and Eri thanks him, saying that the ghost Reiko is now gone. Mayumi's relieved that he made the right choice, but we see Eri pick up some mail from the floor that has Reiko's name on it. Turns out Mayumi chose wrong, and he just helped kill an innocent woman, allowing Reiko, the real ghost, to fully take over her body. Yuma finishes up and the officer comes into his room one more time. He tells Yuma he's here to save him and grabs his arm, trying to pull him out of the room. Suddenly, the officer's bruised arm snaps at several points, and he starts being pulled toward the window screaming until finally he's yanked out into the night. So let's get into the 51st story, What You Can't See. Yuma appears to be dragging something heavy and wrapped in a sheet into his room with the help of Hina. Once they set it down, Hina looks pretty frightened and says they should call an ambulance, but Yuma pulls back the sheet to show her that they're too late, implying the cop is dead. He says he'll figure it all out and asks her not to tell anyone what happened. After she leaves, he stands shaking, feeling guilty, but he reassures himself that it wasn't his fault and that he needs to keep telling the stories, which leads us to 51. A man wakes up to his alarm sounding, but he fumbles when he tries to put on his glasses and knocks them to the floor. As he leans down to pick them up, we see from his blurry-eyed perspective, and in the corner of the panel appears to be a human foot. He quickly puts his glasses on and looks up, but no one's there. It must have been his imagination. It's been a stressful week, and he decides to start the day with a warm bath, setting his glasses down while he rinses his face. He looks up when he finishes, and yet again we see the panel in his blurry vision. This time, outside the bathroom door, a tall figure seems to be watching him. The man freaks out and puts his glasses on, but there's no one there. This time he's convinced he saw someone and gets up to check the rest of the house, only to find no one around. He sits back down in the tub and pulls his glasses off to rub his eyes. In this brief moment, we can more clearly see what appears to be a woman with long hair walking toward him. Something seems off about her body, like it's bloody or disfigured, but it's actually more terrifying that we can't tell. The man yells, and this time he holds his glasses a few inches from his face, giving us a simultaneous look at the woman just feet away from him and also the empty room through his lenses. At this point, the guy pieces together that this thing is not human and runs out of the bath with his glasses still off. He looks back and we can see the blurry figure chasing after him. He screams at it to get back when suddenly the lights shut off. He puts his glasses back on and struggles to find the switch, but the lights click on by themselves. Shaking, he slowly removes his glasses again, only to find the ghastly woman inches from his face, this time in clear view, and it's horrifying. It's a clever idea for a horror story, and I'm sure it resonates even more with anyone who sees the blurry world like this guy without their glasses, such as myself. Story 52, Lord Oida. Yuma lugs a massive suitcase into his room, then sits down to tell the next story. It begins with a teen boy falling and scraping his knee pretty bad while at the market. He walks up to a shop where he finds an odd bracelet with the small charm of a man's face on it. He tries it on, and when the owner walks out, he assures him that he wasn't trying to steal it or anything like that. The shopkeeper says that the bracelet isn't his, but he knows what it is. He believes the young man has been chosen by Lord Oida, a god of protection. Should he suffer any injuries, Lord Oida will take them on instead. The shopkeeper then tells him to go ahead and take the bracelet home with him. The kid is a little weirded out, but starts walking home, and in an almost jarring panel, we see a tall, naked man with unnaturally long limbs, smiling and walking behind him. The kid turns around and falls to the ground scared, but no one else seems to see the guy. He notices that the tall man has a nasty scrape on his knee, and the kid's knee is now perfectly fine. Remembering what the shopkeeper said, he pieces together that this entity is Lord Oida, who has taken the damage from his knee onto himself. Well, this sounds great in theory, but Lord Awhile stays right by the kid's side from then on, every waking second, even floating next to him while he sleeps. As it would anyone, this starts driving the kid crazy, and he asks Awhile to leave him be, but the creepy dude doesn't respond. He then realizes he can't remove the bracelet either. Out of frustration, the teen bangs his head on his desk, and sure enough, the bruise appears on Awhile instead. On a closer look, Lord Awhile is a creepy looking guy. His eyes are half closed and his pupils go opposite directions. One day while walking down the stairs to the train, the kid stumbles and falls, getting brutally banged up all the way down. The people around him assume he'll need an ambulance for such a big fall, but thanks to Lord Awhile, he's perfectly fine. He looks over at the entity, and we don't see him, but the boy seems pretty startled. Later, he travels back to the shopkeeper and says he doesn't want Awhile's protection anymore, asking how to get rid of him. The shopkeep tells him he can separate from Awhile, but doing so would mean taking back all the injuries that Awhile suffered by the kid's side. The man asks if he'd be willing to do that, and the kid looks over at Awhile, finally revealing his body, which is now torn up and mangled. His limbs are twisted and broken, and his head is bashed open. So I guess now the kid could either receive the terrible injuries and likely die, or have Lord Awhile and his terrifying body continue to follow him around forever. Yuma ends the story and says not to worry, we're making it through the 100 stories no matter what. He then starts to lift the dead body in his room as if planning to put it into the suitcase. Story 53, Raised Hand. Yuma shoos a huge fly off of whatever he's talking to and gets started with the 53rd story. A teacher named Kayama seems almost scared when a student raises their hand just to go to the bathroom. He lets them go, then asks if anyone can answer the question on the board. One hand stands out at the back of the class. A young boy with a scared expression has his hand raised high, and no one else seems to notice him. Kayama ignores this, but looks pretty freaked out. Several instances of people raising their hands continue to scare Kayama. Another teacher asks him if he wants to go out for drinks, and he implies he doesn't really drink anymore. On the train ride home, Kayama is thrown off by the many hands in the air holding the rails for support. He then sees a small hand behind him reaching up. It's the young boy standing next to him with fear and agony in his eyes, as if he's about to cry out in terror. Kayama gets off the bus and is stopped by a policeman who asks his name. He immediately raises his hands and says he won't put up a fight. He confesses. We see his hands in cuffs and hear part of a news segment about a man accused of hitting a person at a crosswalk with his car and fleeing the scene. In a flashback, Kayama is driving drunk, nearly falling asleep when he looks up to see a young boy at the crosswalk. The poor kid is holding his hand up and crying out for Kayama to stop. Yuma ends the story and, noticing the flies around his room, decides he needs to hurry up and get rid of the body. He starts moving the suitcase and accidentally knocks it over, making a loud noise. The chapter ends with one of his parents asking what's going on in there. Story 54, Bait. Taking place immediately after the last chapter, Yuma is hunched over as if saying a prayer or something, and then he grabs his door handle as if to hold it closed and starts the next story. A man named Takanori talks about his friend Aya's Twitter account. Her last tweet ominously said, "I think I get it now," and 2 days later, they found her dead body. Still, Takanori can't bring himself to unfollow her account. He sadly looks at her old tweets, but then notices a brand new image posted on her account of just a black box. He starts speculating that someone must have hacked her account, and several tweets start popping up where Aya is mocking the living and talking about how great death is. What kind of sickos would do this to her account? Takanori investigates the dark photo again, and on a closer look, he thinks he sees something. He turns the brightness all the way up on his phone and sees the image hidden inside. It's Aya screaming. It's pretty frightening, and Takanori notices something else behind her. There's some graffiti that he actually recognizes from the communal bathrooms at a local park. Taking matters into his own hands, he decides to go check it out, hoping he could get a clue as to what happened to Aya, and if he sees anything, he'll call the police. He looks inside the bathroom stall with the familiar graffiti and sees nothing. Then he notices a fresh post from Aya. Another black picture. This time when he turns up the brightness, he actually sees a picture of the back of his own head. He tries to play it cool and slowly turns around, but no one's there. We then see a creepy guy standing over the bathroom stall and taking pictures. Just as Takanori notices him, the man puts a rope around his neck and starts strangling him, yelling out, "I caught ya." He takes a photo of Takanori's last moments alive, and it looks pretty similar to Aya's. The man asks if he's ever been fishing before, saying all you need to do is drop some bait and reel the sucker in who's dumb enough to get caught. The thing is, he's had enough fish. We can see Takanori's legs dangling lifeless, and in the final panel, his Twitter account suddenly posts a picture of a black box. Outside of his room, Yuma's dad tries to get him to open the door, but he refuses. There's a loud bang on the door as his father yells at him to open it, and adds that there's a strange smell coming from inside. Story 55. Broadcast. The next day, Yuma's door is straight up off its hinges. He moves it aside and then puts it back as he enters, and the poor kid is pretty beat up. He just sits down and begins the story. It starts with the school broadcast system sounding the bell, but there's also some strange voices coming through as well. The new transfer student is pretty weirded out by it, and that's not the only thing. He's also found that a lot of rooms are off limits at this school, and he even found paper talismans about for warding off evil spirits. One day he starts hearing those familiar voices again and follows them to the broadcasting room. Inside there's a cassette playing, which is where the voices were coming from. He removes the tape, assuming this, as well as the talismans, to be some kind of elaborate prank. As he exits the room, he spots a glossy-eyed girl staring at him. She asks why he went in there, and he tells her he was curious about the noise. She seems to know about the voices and starts to explain to him about how this school works. Apparently, it was built on some sacred burial ground, and as long as anyone can remember, it's been haunted. So the students and staff have put up talismans everywhere. And the voices playing through the speakers were actually sutras, ritualistic chants to help keep the evil spirits at bay. They're the main reason everyone can go to school in peace here. Well, realizing he fucked up, the transfer student starts trying to put the tape back, but the girl grabs him by the arm and says it's too late. It seems that she was one of these evil spirits, and on the final page, she laughs and begins snapping his arm in several places. Yuma finishes up the story, and behind him his father enters the room, moving the door aside. He tells Yuma he should throw the door away. He lost that privilege when he stole his dad's suitcase. He then puts a hand on Yuma's shoulder and begins smelling something. Then he asks the boy, "Where is it?" Story 56. Won't forget. Hina's come to visit again, and she seems worried, saying that she tried knocking many times over the past few days, but no one would answer. Then she asks if something happened, and Yuma interrupts her to request she tell the next ghost story. He sits her down at his desk, and she reluctantly begins. A high school student walks out to find it raining and wishes he'd remembered his umbrella. Then he sees his crush, Miyashita, walk by. He blushes as they make eye contact, and when she realizes he doesn't have an umbrella, she offers to share hers. Some other students take notice of this interaction and of course start making fun of them. The boy then awkwardly declines her offer, and the poor girl looks brokenhearted as she walks off into the rain. Worse than that, as Miyashita crosses the street, a car hits her, violently crushing her body as the student watches in horror. The weeks go on, and Miyashita becomes something like a ghost story, with one kid even disappearing after supposedly sharing her umbrella. Later, they found him dead, with blood gushing from his head. The boy feels guilty for what happened, and on a rainy day he waits outside until finally Miyashita appears holding her umbrella. Her face is obscured, but her body looks dirty and damaged. The boy apologizes for that day, confessing that he always liked her and got so flustered when she asked to share the umbrella that he didn't know what to do. He didn't have the courage to join her, and now, because of his pride, she's dead. Miyashita simply asks again if he'll join her, and he realizes that she must be stuck in this same routine, luring others into sharing her fate, all because he turned her down that day. He grabs her by the hand and tells her that he would like to join her. Finally showing her face, Miyashita has tears in her eyes as she tells him she'll never forget him, and she disappears, leaving him with her umbrella. That's the end of this one, and I noticed that Hina's stories usually end on a brighter note than Yuma's. There's always some kind of silver lining. Well, Hina asks what happened to the guy they dragged in, and Yuma tells her she's being a little loud. He quiets her down and tells her to get an answer to her question, she should look under the bed. She kneels down out of frame and screams as the chapter ends. Story 57. Sleep paralysis. Yuma paces around his room in the middle of the night. He says she'll be coming soon. At least I hope. And in the meantime, he tells the next story. A woman is sleeping next to her husband when she wakes up completely unable to move. All she can do is look around. We then see a creepy pair of legs walk into the room all the way up to the foot of her bed. Getting a better look at the entity, it seems to be an emaciated old man with large eyes. The woman decides she must be experiencing sleep paralysis. She believes this old man is simply a nightmare blending with reality, but she can't help but recall something she heard once, that ghosts can bring on sleep paralysis. She doesn't believe in ghosts though, which is why they bought this house under market value even after a horrible death occurred here. Apparently, an old man died when he became immobile and couldn't get up to eat, eventually causing him to starve to death. As she recounts the story, the thin old man starts pointing back and forth between her and her husband, as if trying to decide something. Finally, he starts walking toward the woman and leans over her, sticking his finger between her lips. The woman begins crying in terror as the entity starts trying to pry her mouth open. But since she's completely locked up, he fails and gives up. Next, he walks over to her husband, who's sound asleep, and successfully reaches into his mouth. The woman, of course, can't do anything but watch as the old man reaches elbow deep into his body, eventually pulling out a slimy white form. Maybe this is the man's soul? At that moment, the woman finally wakes up, screaming. She's relieved to find it was all a dream and tries to wake her husband up as well to tell him what happened. The thing is, he doesn't wake up. And at the same time, she hears a strange noise coming from the other room. She opens the door and peeks in, where the old man is eating up her husband's soul like ramen. It's pretty disgusting because even though it's the man's spirit or whatever, his stomach is torn open and the old man is slurping down his intestines. Disgusting. As Yuma finishes up the story, Hina arrives outside his window. It seems they plan on trying to move the body. Hina doesn't think they can do it, but Yuma assures her they can do it if they work together. As they talk, they hear someone in the hall, and Yuma quickly covers him and Hina with his blanket. In the dark, Yuma's father comes into the doorless room as the two shake under his covers. Story 58, Pavlov's Boy. Yuma sits at his desk with a bruised face and swollen eye. He says it all went up in flames and that Hina even saw him being beaten by his father. This is why he didn't want to ask for anyone's help, and he won't do it again. He then moves into the next story. A high school student named Kojima goes into a full-body panic when his phone starts ringing in class. He immediately jumps up and runs out of the classroom and down the hall as he answers the phone. The person on the line gives him a lunch order, and later we see Kojima arrive on the roof with a bag. It seems this was a delivery for a bully, and the kid kicks Kojima hard in the belly, accusing him of being late. The bully's friend says it must be nice having a slave, and the bully tells him it took him a while to condition him this way. Simply by calling his phone, Kojima has developed the involuntary reaction of running as fast as he can to the bully, kind of like Pavlov's dogs. If you're unfamiliar, this was an experiment on classical conditioning where Ivan Pavlov rang a bell every time he fed his dogs. Over time, they developed the response of salivation just by hearing the bell ring, even if there was no food. It appears the bully has trained Kojima to run to him anytime he hears his phone ring. Pretty fucked up. Kojima ominously tells the bully that from tomorrow onward, he won't be seeing him again. But the bully just blows this off. The next day, Kojima has ditched school, but the bully guarantees he'll come if he calls. Kojima doesn't answer, but after a while, someone appears at the top of the stairwell. Finally, they step out into the light, and it's Kojima's headless body. It runs full tilt towards the bully, knocking him off the roof to his death below. As Kojima's body stands there gushing blood from the neck, we follow the blood trail back to his house. There we see Kojima's head on a rope tied to his door. I guess he was trying to end it all when the bully called, and his body, conditioned to respond, ran all the way to the school. Freaky. As Yuma finishes up the story, he hears a rattle at his window. It's Hina, and Yuma begs her to leave, but she's determined to help him. Yuma breaks down crying as she wipes his tears. Story 59, The Tunnel. This chapter starts with Hina standing alone in the room. Yuma shows up and says that everyone is asleep, and then he starts on the next story. It's about a common supernatural event that happens in a local tunnel. People often see two ghosts, a girl running for her life and a man chasing her down. The boy telling us this actually knew the high school girl who died here. Her name was Rui Asuka, and as he lays flowers down at the edge of the tunnel, he hears footsteps. The two apparitions appear in shadow form, acting out that horrible scenario of the man stabbing her to death. The strange thing is, Asuka clearly died in the event, but the killer didn't. So why are there two ghosts? The boy speculates that maybe it's the rumors themselves that have conjured up these phantoms. In order to test his theory, he slowly starts trying to remove any mention of the tunnel ghost from the internet. When he visits the tunnel again, he does see the phantoms, but they're way less visible. It seems he was right, and the stories about the tunnel circulating online are what keep the ghosts here. He goes back to his computer and doubles down on his efforts, but it seems they've backfired in a major way. There are now more posts than ever about the tunnels, and people are freaked out by the fact that any mention of the ghosts online seems to be erased. It's a classic example of the Streisand effect in play, and the stories are more popular than ever. The boy realizes he can't stop the hundreds of posts and goes back to the tunnel to see what effect this might have had. Inside, clear as day, the scene plays out again. Asuka is now fully visible as if she was alive and running for her life. The killer, as usual, stabs her in the back, but this time we see his face. And it's the boys. In his efforts to stop the ghosts, he made the situation worse by spreading the rumors even further. It's an interesting commentary on the internet's obsession with true crime and the sometimes unintentional exploitation of real people's deaths. Yuma finishes the story, but Hina seems lost in thought and a cold shiver runs down her spine. She feels bad for failing Yuma, but he tells her he came up with a good plan and that she should go back home. He grabs her arm to lead her out, but she winces and says that it hurts. They both look at her arm, worried. Story 60. Bug. Yuma says that Hina hasn't come back and wonders if someone found out she's been sneaking out, or if she's just sleeping. Either way, he starts the next story. A woman named Shimizu is listening intently through her earbuds to someone talking when suddenly the signal goes out. In her apartment, we see the walls are filled with photos of a popular streamer. Later, she shows up to the house of a strange man who seems to sell mischievous items to people. He already sold her 2 bugs that she used to eavesdrop on the streamer by sending them to him in the mail. Unfortunately, he found both of them and broke them. But this chick is desperate and will try as many times as necessary. The man then suggests something different, maybe a magical tool. He takes her into a back room where he has a collection of magical items and shows some off, like a love potion for instance. But that's not going to work in this situation. Next, he shows off what he calls a life knife. You can cut a person up with it and they will still live. In the past, its users would cut off the heads of their cheating lovers and keep it alive so no one else could have them. Unfortunately, this doesn't seem like much use either, as Shimizu could never get close enough to cut him. She says that millions of people watch his streams. He belongs to everyone, but Shimizu wants to hear his voice nearby, like he's speaking directly into her ear. The man tells her that he doesn't have anything that would do that, but Shimizu gets an idea and whispers it into his ear. Later, we see the streamer get a fresh load of fan mail, including a little stuffed cat that fits perfectly in his background. It seems that this was another bug sent by Shimizu, who listens intently in her apartment. She's finally gotten what she wanted, the streamer's voice right in her ears. However, he notices blood at the bottom of the cat and cuts it open to find something horrific. Shimizu's severed ears sitting within the cat's stuffing. I guess she used the life knife to cut off her own ears and send them so that she could listen in. Disturbing. Yuma finishes up the story and then finds Hina outside of his window. She seems injured and falls onto his bed. Here we can see bruises have spread all across her arm, much like what happened to the cop. Story 61. Peekaboo. Yuma says he took Hina back to her house and hopefully she can rest and recover. In the meantime, he starts the next story. It begins with a pretty traumatic situation. Social workers are removing a young girl from her mother's filthy apartment where garbage is piled high. The woman screams at them, but they tell her that they have no choice. They've already warned her many times, and the girl will have to come with them. Clearly, the little girl is terrified, but her mother is in denial and tries to play a game of peekaboo to cheer her up. Of course, it's actually scary as hell coming from this unhinged woman. The little girl is happy to escape, and as she turns her back on her mom, the psycho lady breaks down on her knees and looks through her hands as if to finish the game of peekaboo. We see her distorted face through her hands, and it's a nightmare. 10 years pass and the girl is now a teenager living in foster care, and then swears that she hears her mother's voice coming from the closet. It sounded like the words peekaboo. This isn't the first time she's heard her mother's phantom voice, and she lives in a constant state of fear. Her mother has continually requested to see her, but she's denied the visit every time. As she walks around the facility, she continues to hear the voice calling out. One day, one of the caregivers informs the girl that her mother has passed away. She breaks down crying in her room, but feels relieved. Finally, she might find peace, not having to live in fear that her mother will someday get to her. As she cries, she begins to hear the voice again coming from her closet. This time, she confronts the sound and opens the closet, where the ghost of her mother is hanging upside down and playing peekaboo. Only her face is torn up and her eye is nearly falling out of the socket. It's a frightening image for sure. Yuma ends the story and is still really concerned about Hina making the connection between the cop's bruises and hers. Story 62. Chased. Yuma says he stopped by Hina's place on the way home, and it seems her bruises are healing. He looks slightly happier as he moves into the next story. A high school student calls himself a psychic and says that he can see dead people walking around, Sixth Sense style. However, he's not afraid of them. He actually finds them pretty annoying and just ignores them. One day he notices a ghost walking behind him low to the ground, and is kind of freaked out when he gets a better look. It's a man who's been cut in half at the torso and is following him on his hands and knees like Teke Teke. The kid's never really seen one like this, especially one that wants to follow him, and he's pretty spooked, so he takes off running. The creepy guy chases after him, dragging himself with his hands, and it looks like he's in agony. The kid almost loses the torso around the corner, but surprisingly, the man's legs come running out. Now both halves of the ghost are chasing him down, and they force him to run onto a mountain trail. He almost gets away, but finds the path is blocked by a massive tree that's fallen. It looks like the ghost has led him here on purpose. The kid suddenly notices a pair of legs under the tree and realizes that this must be the man's corpse. He's not really sure what the ghost wants. It seems a little too late to call an ambulance. The worried-looking ghost then pounces over the tree to show the kid something else. On the other side is the man's crushed upper half, and in his arms is a small baby. The kid calls the police and picks up the child, who luckily is still breathing, while the ghost of the man bows his head in thanks. Yuma says that he actually got that story from Hina, which explains why there turned out to be a silver lining. He hopes if she gets better, she'll be able to tell another soon. Yuma's stepmom then enters the room still in a neck brace and says that the police were here looking for Yuma. She raises her voice and asks him what he did. Story 63, Dream After Dream. Yuma enters his room all smiles and says that Hina is all better and the bruises are gone. He's relieved that it doesn't seem to be related to the cop at all and continues on the next story. A father stares down at the dead bodies of his wife and son. He's in shock and suddenly blood appears on his chest and he falls unconscious. He wakes up in bed realizing it was only a dream. He gets up and runs into his son, who asks if he can stay home from school. The father tells him he'll have to power through it, and suddenly he wakes up again, as if that was a dream too. He hears a loud slap and walks into the kitchen where his wife is slapping his son because he ditched school. The kid apologizes and the father calms everyone down and tries to cheer everyone up, saying he just had a horrific dream, so it's nice to see them all lively. To make sure he's not dreaming again, he pinches himself, but he can't feel a thing. The TV turns on to a strange show, where a man in a mask and a suit talks about dreams. He says it's for the purpose of consolidating information and escaping reality. The father starts panicking, realizing he's still dreaming, and wakes up again. This time he's back in the nightmare where his wife and child lay dead on the floor covered in blood. He falls back again and wakes up to find his family smiling at him in the kitchen. The TV's on and playing the news where there's reports of an incident in which a boy stabbed his parents before taking his own life. The mother lost her life and the father is still in critical condition. Realizing what's happened, the father doesn't pinch himself this time and instead carries on in the dream with his happy family. It seems he's stuck in an infinite state of dreaming while his body is in critical condition and he doesn't want to accept the fact that his wife and child are dead. Yuma finishes the story and thinks he'll check on Hina again, but before he leaves his room, his father comes in. He's back home early from work and says that he was worried about Yuma because a dead body was found at the nearby park. It looks like Yuma and Hina did manage to get the body out, but it's been discovered. Story 64, Part-Time Job. Yuma crawls out of bed and fixes his desk lamp, which is knocked over, then begins the next story. Two students get a summer job that seems to pay well, though they aren't exactly sure what the job is, other than it's some kind of call center. When they arrive at the building, it's empty except for two desks with phones and a manual. They read the manual, which says that they're a consultation center for the dead, and they must lend an ear to any concerns the deceased may have. It goes on to say that getting involved with them is extremely dangerous and to keep all of their responses to strictly positive affirmations. The biggest rule is to never ask the dead a question. If they do, they may be taken to the other world themselves. They're unsure if any of this is for real, but they get started anyway. As soon as they sit down, calls begin coming in. Some are angry, some are sad, but the dead mostly feel lonely on the other side and want someone to listen to them. After a long day of calls, the two students are exhausted and start to leave when one of the phones rings. One of the students heads back in to answer it. The door shuts, and when she picks up the phone, she can't hear what the person is saying, so she asks if they can repeat themselves, not thinking about the fact that this is a question. The other student just heads home, and the next day, their friend never shows up. He sits down, ready to start the day, when he hears her voice from the other desk. He's relieved to hear her and asks if something happened when she answered that call the night before. The girl replies, "That's a question, right?" The guy goes around and looks at her desk, only to see that the phone is off the hook. His friend's voice was coming from the world of the dead, and she admits that she was just lonely and wanted some company there, implying that he'll be killed next. After the story ends, Yuma feels defeated now that they found the body. He believes it'll be no time before they connect it to him and Hina. He starts shaking violently and crying, saying that the 100 stories can't end yet. Story 65. The child vending machine. Yuma says it's been 2 days since they found the body and no police have come back. Maybe things will be okay after all. He says he'll tell the next ghost story and then go check on Hina. In this story, a woman seeks out a mythical vending machine where you can supposedly purchase children. Their lives were cut short at some point, and the machine gives them a second chance at loving parents. The woman has always wanted children and has traveled deep into the mountains to find this legendary machine. Well, she finally finds it in a clearing in the forest. It's almost comical seeing a vending machine just sitting out in the middle of nowhere like this. Well, she pushes the button on the thing and an aluminum can falls out with the name Mimiko on it. She opens the top and sees an eye peering up at her, calling her mama. Startled, she drops it and a substance leaks out of the can, forming into a small child. It smiles and runs into her arms, and she gladly accepts the little tyke. Just then, a person walks out carrying a box. They kind of look like an elf or maybe an angel, with both pointy ears and wings. Turns out they manage the machine and are here to restock the product. The woman asks the creature if there's any way that they could move the machine to a more populated area so that the kids would have a better chance at being purchased. The angel says no way, it's hard to get to on purpose. It's a trial to make sure that only parents with a strong resolve can find it. That way kids are certain to end up with parents who love them. This actually makes sense, and the woman starts to walk away with her new child as the angel takes some older cans out of the vending machine and places them on the ground. Then, in a shocking turn of events, the angel starts stomping on the cans, which spurt blood. The woman tries to stop her, but the angel says she's just disposing of them. Only so many children can be stored, and these ones are expired. The cans start screaming out for a mother, but the angel continues stomping on them, and they gush blood all over the place. The woman just covers her ears from the screaming children and runs away. Well, that was a creative and disturbing one. Yuma heads off to see Hina when he's stopped by his stepmom. She tells him he can't go out as it's not safe with the killer on the loose. She can't believe such a thing would happen so close to them, and Yuma tries to play along, saying, "Yeah, and who would have thought it would be a police officer?" The only problem is, they haven't identified the body yet. How did Yuma know it was a cop? Story 66. Fence. Yuma sits at his desk trying to convince himself that his stepmother won't have noticed his slip-up and goes into the next story. A boy named Takeo calls up to his neighbor Mamoru to come play soccer with him and some other kids. Just a quick note here, in these panels it looks like Takeo is a ghost or something because he just phases through the fence, and this confused the hell out of me the first time I read it, until I realized that this is just the author's way of showing us Takeo's face through the fence. So there's nothing supernatural here, it's just giving us as a reader a better look. It's worth mentioning because the rest of this doesn't make sense if you think that Takeo's a ghost already. Anyway, Mamoru heads down to play and gets pretty jealous at Takeo's great soccer skills. He decides intentionally to ram into him out of envy, but this causes Takeo to fall headfirst into the iron fence, killing him on the spot. In the following days, Mamoru locks himself in his room out of guilt, and one day he starts hearing a noise outside. He looks out his window to see the shadowy ghost of Takeo staring at him through the fence. The days go on and he just stands there. Then one day he starts speaking, saying he hates this and to let him go. This turns into him screaming, "I want to live," over and over. Despite his fear, Mamoru feels this is all his fault and goes down to the fence to apologize, hoping to set Takeo's spirit free. He walks up to the ghost with his head bowed and apologizes, but when he looks up, he's so shocked he falls to his feet. Takeo's body is being forced into slices through the fence as he begs to be let free. It's a gruesome sight that kind of reminds me of those Play-Doh kits. Yuma finishes the story and his stepmom enters the room saying that they finally identified the body and it was a cop. In fact, it was the one that was here asking questions a while ago. She says that she always knew there was something creepy about Yuma, and now she has her chance to get him out of her house. Story 67. Exorcism Spring. Yuma wonders if he's going to be taken away, but takes no time getting to the next story. The story starts with a sign for an exorcism hot spring that'll do away with lower back pain, stiff shoulders, and spiritual disorders. We then see a man with a creepy demon lady on his back enter the spring. As he sinks into the water, the spirit starts melting and her eyeballs fall out. It's pretty gross. The man leaves feeling better than ever, and the owner thanks him for his patronage. He shows his wife Momoko how much money they made this week, and it appears that she's gravely ill. She wants to stop this whole thing since they're technically lying to their customers. The spring isn't natural and it's actually just tap water. Her husband defends it, saying that it does cure their customers. Salt is mixed in with the hot water to wash the spirits away, and the only place for them to go is down a drain that's blocked by spiritual talismans trapping them inside. He says that more customers will come if they say that it's a natural spring, and this will lead to more people being aided. If you can tell a lie that benefits everyone, wouldn't that be the most splendid lie? Momoko is still frightened of the spring as she feels she's on the verge of death herself. The next day, Momoko is up and walking around, saying she feels better and insists that they take a dip in the hot spring together. When they get inside, the husband splashes his face when he realizes there's no salt in the water. He then dives under and finds that the talismans have been removed as well. He freaks and says they need to get out of the water, but Momoko grabs him and giggles. He realizes that she tricked him and asks her why she lied to him. Suddenly, dozens of spirits come crawling out to grab him. Momoko repeats the phrase, "If you can tell a lie that benefits everyone, wouldn't that be the most splendid lie?" The ghoulish spirits all start pulling the man under the water in a frenzy. Now that Momoko's a ghost, her tricking her husband benefits all the spirits that are trapped in here, a reversal of what he was doing for the living. As Yuma wraps up the story, a man peeks into his room who's wearing an eye patch and introduces himself as Kido. He says he works for the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Special Countermeasures Department. He asks Yuma if he knows Officer Takayanagi, and the kid denies it. Kido follows up with the fact that they found Yuma's fingerprints on the suitcase the body was in. He then asks the boy to come have a chat with him, but suddenly stops and removes his eye patch, looking around the room and saying, "Something's in here." Okay, who the hell is this guy? Story 68. The Red Book. This chapter starts with Yuma in a different location. It's unclear where, but he's talking under a table. He says that the police think only an adult could have murdered the cop, but they had Yuma hide the body for them. His plan is to just play along, and he starts telling the next story. A girl buys a used exam study guide and finds some helpful sticky notes inside from the previous owner. As she reviews the book tirelessly, she can't help but feel a connection to the girl who's written the notes before her. It makes her feel like she has a study partner, but at the same time, some of the notes are getting pretty negative. The girl tries to encourage her imaginary partner, but instead she starts feeling negative as well, as if the sticky notes are reflecting how bad she feels. The notes get more and more personal, and the girl feels an even deeper connection with the note writer. She finally decides to jump ahead to the end of the book to find out what happened to the girl. It simply reads, "I failed." Just then, from the corner of her eye, we see the shadow phantom of the previous owner run onto the balcony and start to jump. The girl follows and looks down where the ghost has splattered onto the pavement. She feels like she can't let the ghost be alone. She climbs up onto the railing, but at the last minute comes to her senses. As she turns herself around, she slips and falls to the ground below, the study guide still in her hand. As the blood pools around her body, it starts to cover the book, turning it red. And another sticky note appears saying, "Nicely done." I guess you could interpret this in different ways, but to me it seems like the book was haunted, and the evil spirit within it was creating messages to slowly warp the girl's psyche against herself. As the story ends, Yuma quickly sits at the table and hides what he's talking to under it. Kido starts asking him questions, namely, what is it that he's hiding? More specifically, who? Story 69. Turtle. Yuma is exhausted from the trip to the police station, and he mentions that it's now been a whole month since he last went to school. He wonders if he'll ever go back at this point, and then goes into the next story. A young boy named Goro is on his deathbed, and his dying wish is for his mother to feed his ashes to his pet turtle. He believes the calcium from his bones will make the turtle's shell stronger. Once she's done feeding him the ashes, she wants her to let the turtle out to sea, so that Goro can see all the beautiful and terrifying sights along with the turtle. Well, the kid does die, and his grieving mother can't let his dying wish go unfulfilled, even if it's insane. She takes his ashes and starts feeding them to the turtle a little bit day by day. On the final day, she notices how much the turtle has grown, and even stranger, his shell almost looks like a face. The turtle bursts out of his habitat and runs to the front door, signaling that it wants to leave. The mother then brings the turtle to the sea for the sake of her son. As she starts setting the turtle in the sand, Goro's face appears in the shell, opening his eyes and mouth. The mother freaks and drops the turtle. Its head then sinks into its shell and re-emerges, only it has Goro's face now. This is definitely one of the weirdest images in the entire series. Yuma finishes the story and says he needs to go back to the station now, this time by himself. He has a really bad feeling about Kido and how he asked about who Yuma was hiding, but hopefully he meant something else by it. Story 70. Under the bed. Yuma says that Kido is coming by again today and that he's coming to see whoever Yuma is talking to. It looks like we might finally get an answer as to what Yuma has had on his desk this whole time. In the story, a man rolls around on his bed when he finds a long strand of hair that I guess belongs to his girlfriend or something. It falls on the ground and he reaches to grab it, inadvertently looking under the bed, which widens his eyes. There's nothing there, he's just surprised at how much dust buildup there is. After cleaning the place, he decides to grab a frozen meal from the kitchen. But he's disappointed when he finds that they're all gone and figures that Nanako must have eaten them despite saying she's on a diet. He grabs a cup of noodles instead and watches TV when he decides it's about time for bed. As he brushes his teeth thoroughly, he hears footsteps from the room above, which really seems to startle him. Finally, he's about to go to sleep when suddenly the door to the apartment unlocks and a figure starts walking in, causing the man to hide under his bed. He's sweating as the figure walks to the end of the bed and looks down. We see a creepy woman peering in, but she doesn't see him and just says that it must have been her imagination. It seems the man slipped out onto the balcony. It's a perfectly normal woman and she brushes her teeth and eats some ramen before getting into bed and calling her mom. She says she gets really lonely living here by herself. And as she speaks, we see the man laying eyes wide under her bed. It looks like she doesn't know that he's living there. It's another great twist and something that legitimately freaks me out. This one's good to read through twice because you'll notice some gross details like how he brushes his teeth with her toothbrush. Gross. Kido shows up just in time to hear Yuma mention that this is the 70th story. He sits down and looks at the object on Yuma's desk, saying, "So this is why you've gone so far." He removes his eye patch again, and we see that his eye is all white. Kido touches the object and quickly pulls his hand back. His arm gets covered in bruises that are spreading rapidly, but he doesn't seem all that fazed. Instead, he pulls out a straw doll and rubs it on his hand. In an instant, the bruises go away. Like I said before, who the hell is this guy? I didn't expect a character like this to show up, but I'm more curious than ever. This actually explains why Hina and the cop both got bruises. At different times, they both touched the object on Yuma's desk. Story 71, Artificial Intelligence. Yuma wonders about Kido and how he made the bruises disappear, and then starts the next story. This one takes place in the future where AI takes up 40% of the population and they're indistinguishable from humans. A girl named Lisa has decided to jump off the school roof because she's sick of constantly guessing whether she's human or not. The only way to know for sure is to jump. A human will die, but an AI will live and only be disfigured. Her friend, Daiichi, tries to dissuade her from jumping, but she says she'd rather die knowing she's a human than live a lie, where all of her emotions and memories have only been code. He tells her that they've been friends since they were kids, but Lisa explains that AI bodies can grow just like human bodies can. Realizing he won't get through to her, Daiichi instead decides to join her. They can die together as humans. They jump off the roof and hit the pavement below, destroying their bodies. For a moment, all is still, and then Daiichi wakes up spewing blood from his mouth, and he contorts his body to stand upright. Next to him, Lisa does the same. Their bodies torn to pieces, they just start laughing hysterically, realizing that they're both AI. As the story ends, it seems Kido was listening in. He says it's dangerous to interrupt during a story. Then he asks Yuma if he's aware of how dangerous this whole thing is. Kido then tells them how the cop's body was covered in those bruises, and says he knows it wasn't Yuma's fault, but they can put an end to this if Yuma helps him. Story 72. Moro Hakayama Station. Yuma is thinking about how Kido's bruises went away and hopes that this means that Hina will be healed as well. Then he starts on the next story. Two schoolgirls, Mita and Yumi, talk about their crushes and how, since they're graduating soon, this could be their last chance to confess their feelings. Mita says that her crush is the guy that she sees on the train every morning for the last 3 years. She's actually never spoken to him as he's on the other train, but for a brief few moments, they look at each other through the windows. Yumi points out that she's only seen the guy's face though. What if he's a bad guy when she finally meets him? Well, either way, Mita decides to shoot her shot and seeks out his train the next day. She finds him and nervously asks if he recognizes her. He says he does, but weirdly there's 2 speech bubbles, as if he said it twice. Blushing, she asks him if he'd like to get to know her better. The guy says that he thinks it'd be best if they didn't. And once again, it's like 2 voices are speaking at once. Confused, Mita looks behind the guy and sees that his back is identical to his front, as if he's stuck in a mirror. She freaks out and looks up at the sign in the train, which says Moro Hakiyama, meaning something like Double Grave Mountain. She steps off the train in fear and looks back at all the people staring at her with creepy eyes. She turns to find Yumi standing in front of her and asks for her help, but when Yumi replies, we once again hear two voices, and it seems that she too is doubled. I don't know what to say about this one, this was weird. At the end of the story, Yuma says he's going to ask Kido to help save Hina, but he's also worried about what Kido said. He doesn't want to put an end to the stories. Story 73, Payback. Yuma contemplates how he's going to save Hina while also getting Kido out of his way. But he interrupts himself to start the next story. A man looks through the garbage by his apartment, wondering if there's anything good worth retrieving. He picks up a doll, but when he sees its human-like face, he throws it into a nearby bush and calls it creepy. A week later, on his daily commute, he sees the doll sitting on the steps right in front of him. It seems to smile at him, and he runs away. When he gets back home to his wife, he tells her about what happened, and she wonders if it's Miss Mary, a real Japanese urban legend about a doll that slowly creeps closer to you. He dismisses this, considering she was right in front of him from the start. Either way, his wife suggests that he apologize to the doll if he sees it again. A few weeks go by, and the man is running late for work when he sees the doll sitting in the middle of the crosswalk. He apologizes to it about before and begs it to let him pass. However, the doll makes a really mean face, and he runs away, taking a slower route to work instead. When he gets to work, his boss says there was a bad accident at the crosswalk where he saw the doll. It looks like he's lucky that he took another route, so maybe the doll saved him? Time goes on, and one day, arriving home from work, the man sees the doll outside his front door. He looks up to see smoke coming from inside the house, and worried about his wife, he just runs in, knocking the doll out of the way. He picks up his wife, who's collapsing inside, but the fires rage, and they both burn up. We can hear the man's screams from the porch where the doll sits burning with tears in its eyes. I really don't know if I understand what happened in this one or what the doll's motives are. After the story, Yuma comes up with a plan to save Hina by intentionally causing Kido to bruise. And when he pulls out the doll, Yuma will steal it and use it on Hina. Story 74, Nuisance. Hina is sitting at Yuma's desk, and it looks like the bruises have spread to her neck. Yuma says he's got to run to the electronics store so they can get set up, and asks her to tell a story while he's gone. She doesn't know what they're setting up for exactly, but goes ahead and tells the 74th story. It's about two brothers, Sora and Riku. Sora and Riku, huh? Anyway, the younger brother, Sora, is really jealous of Riku for always one-upping him at everything. One day, Sora tries to outrun Riku and falls on the ground, skinning his knee. His older brother tries to make him feel better by saying, "Pain, pain, go away," and rubbing his knee. This just pisses Sora off, and he slaps Riku's hand and pushes him. Unfortunately, right in front of a large truck, which kills him. His parents try to assure Sora it wasn't his fault, but secretly we learn that Sora actually pushed his brother on purpose with the intent of killing him. He recounts all the times his brother was a nuisance to him, constantly proving to be a better son. Well, now he can't bother him anymore. At his next taekwondo match, Sora gets a nasty cut, but still wins. However, instead of being proud of Sora, his father says he thinks Riku would have done well too, and breaks down crying. This just sets Sora off. Even in death, his brother is the favorite. He goes to the roadside memorial and starts stomping the flowers when the mangled body of Riku appears and starts muttering the word pain over and over. Riku's face is half torn off, and he stands up walking towards Sora like a zombie. However, instead of hurting him, he says, "Pain, pain, go away," and touches Sora's cheek where he was cut. When he removes his hand, the cut is gone. Even in death, he was looking after his brother, who treated him like shit. Damn. Hina finishes the story and says she's worried about Yuma and his behavior. He's starting to scare her more and more by the day. Just then, Yuma shows up with something that seems to scare Hina. We don't see what it is, but he says he's going to use it on Kido to steal his doll. Story 75, Mirror of the Witching Hour. Kido is uneasy about entering Yuma's room, saying he feels an unnerving atmosphere, but Yuma ushers him in and tells him to wait while he finishes the 75th story. A girl talks about the legend of a large mirror in one of the stairwells at her school. Supposedly, it lets you see a year into the future. If you look at it at 2 a.m., your reflection will either be smiling or frowning, indicating whether you'll be happy or sad a year from now. The girl is more curious about her future than ever as she's about to graduate. In class, the teacher reminds the students to stop breaking into the school at night just because of some dumb rumor. After hearing some students talk about the mirror again and how it actually worked, the girl finally decides she'll try it for herself. That night, she's surprised when the gate is unlocked at the school, and she makes her way to the mirror. She waits until exactly 2 a.m. and then anxiously looks up to see her face in the mirror. Instead of a smile or frown, she finds her reflection has no face at all. She's pretty shocked, and at that moment, a pair of hands grab her neck from behind. It's the teacher from earlier, and he smiles as he chokes her out. I guess that's why her face was blank. She has no future at all. The story ends, and Yuma tells Kido he's probably uneasy because of the girl. It seems this is Hina's cue, and she steps into the room. Of course, Kido is surprised to see her covered in bruises, and at the same time, Yuma runs up, clutching something in his hand and bumping into Kido with it. Kido then lifts up his shirt, where there are bruises covering his body, and he grabs Yuma by the hair, calling him a brat. Story 76, the Sanzu River. Yuma hangs his head in defeat and says that they failed. Kido didn't bring the doll with him, and so they couldn't steal it. This is painfully clear as Hina lays on Yuma's bed, still covered in the bruises. Looking riddled with guilt, Yuma begins the next story. A young man named Takumi wakes up on a rocky shore to see his grandmother holding him. The last thing he remembers is his father beating him, and he's confused to see his grandmother, who died of an illness 8 years ago. Her death hit him particularly hard because she was very kind to him, and together they confided with each other about his violent parents. His grandmother apologizes for leaving him all alone to face them, but she does confirm that she's dead. Takumi is still alive, however, and this river is the final stretch before death. There's a choice to be made though. Takumi could refuse to cross the river and instead continue through the forest ahead, which would bring him back to life. His grandma traveled here to help him make the right decision. Surprisingly, Takumi decides that dying may not be that bad, as living has only caused him suffering. Plus, at least his grandma is here, and he wouldn't have to be alone anymore. So the two get on a boat and start rowing down the river. Seeing how much bigger and stronger Takumi has gotten, his grandma asks why he hasn't stood up to his father. She moves his hair to the side, and we can see a pretty big gash where his father struck him, and then she shows a similar wound on her own head. This is a shock to Takumi as he realizes that his father lied about how his grandmother died. In reality, he beat her to death just like him. This lights a fire under Takumi, and just as they nearly reach the final shores of death, he turns the boat around, insisting there's something he needs to do. They get back to the forest, and Takumi heads off as his grandmother encourages him, presumably to kill his father and get revenge for them both. As the story ends, Kido shows up covered in bruises. Yuma tells him he needs to make another doll, but Kido says that would take too much time, and he reaches out to grab Hina. This isn't to harm her, but instead to heal her. Kido seems to take on the bruises from Hina, which spread onto his own body. Story 77, Parade of Ants. Yuma's face is soaked with tears, and he says he's done something that can't be undone. He tries to convince himself that Kido will be fine, and then continues with the next story. A boy is mercilessly smashing ants under his shoe in the grass outside when he's interrupted by his mother, who says it's time to head home. He scrapes the dead ants off his shoes and runs off with his mom. When they get home, the kid notices his shoes still have ants on them and brushes them off. Later, while watching TV, he sees a black speck on the screen, and upon further investigation, it turns out to be another ant, and the kid just smushes it with his finger. When he sits down for dinner, he's startled by an ant crawling on his plate. He tries to wipe it away, but soon the food on his plate is swarming with the things. In a panic, he calls for his mother, but she doesn't see anything. His food is perfectly fine and untouched. Reluctantly, he takes a bite and immediately breaks into a sweat. Gagging, he opens his mouth and ants come flooding out, wriggling on his tongue. The kid runs to the bathroom to rinse his mouth out, and when he leaves, he sees thousands of ants scuttering down the hall. They climb up the boy's legs and cover his body, biting him. He screams in pain and lifts up his sleeve to reveal a large hole in his arm that the ants are crawling in and out of. It seems they've found a new place to start a colony. After the story, Hina comes into the room smiling, and she doesn't have any of the bruises. She tells Yuma she's all better now and wants to thank Kido for saving her. Yuma tells her that Kido is too far gone. He had to become the substitute doll himself in order to save her. As Yuma trembles and cries, Hina grabs him and asks if Kido is still alive. Story 78. Pig Daughter. Yuma is on the computer in his room and seems relieved after checking the news. He then starts on the next story. A married couple is traveling home from their daughter's funeral when the father suddenly stops and runs off into the woods. Still shaken from her daughter's death, his wife continues home to mourn, and later that evening, her husband returns holding a pig in his arms. Taken aback, the woman asks why on earth he has a pig and is even more shocked by his answer. He believes that this is their daughter, Anna. He says that the reason he ran off was he heard Anna's voice calling to him when he found this wild pig. Pulling back the pig's ear, he shows 3 little birthmarks exactly like their daughter had. This is all the evidence he needs to be convinced that this is Anna. The pig then runs up to the woman and she slaps the shit out of it to keep it away. She's pretty pissed at her husband's insanity and tells him to take the pig back where he got it. He just cries tears of joy and hugs the pig, saying that they can be a family again now. That night, the wife stares at a picture of Anna when she hears some disgusting noises coming from the dining room. She walks in to see her husband feeding the pig ice cream on the kitchen table. It's revolting, and the pig breaks the bowl it's eating out of in the process. The wife is livid as the bowl that broke was made by their daughter, and the pig runs off down the hallway. The husband just laughs and says, "Look, she even remembers where her room is." And it is a little weird. The pig jumps up and seems to pull the handle on the door to the daughter's room and goes inside. Following behind, the wife enters the room and is immediately hit with a terrible stench. The next panel is one of the more disgusting in this whole series. It's a detailed close-up of the pig standing on the daughter's bed and projectile shitting all over it. I don't know why that was necessary. Well, anyway, the beast starts rolling around in its own filth as the woman watches in horror. This pig has tainted everything she loves: her husband, her daughter, and her memories of both of them. As she laments the current state of affairs, the pig does something pretty strange. It sits at the daughter's desk and picks up a crayon. The mother rushes over to scold the beast for messing up more of her daughter's things, but is stunned to see that the pig has drawn something. A clear depiction of 2 happy parents and their young daughter. Maybe this really is Anna reincarnated. A pretty interesting twist, but that's not the end of the story. The next day, the husband is desperately looking for Anna, and his wife says, "Never mind that, today we're having a feast." On the final page, it's clear that she has slaughtered the pig and made all kinds of pork-based dishes out of it. Pretty fucked up considering there was clear evidence that this was actually her daughter. After the story, Yuma returns to his computer and his fears have come to fruition as he sees a news article concerning a local detective. Apparently, the officer died in his home under suspicious circumstances and covered in bruises. Yuma falls to the floor in shock, realizing that Keto really is dead. Story 79, Pinky Promise. Hina walks in and straight up asks Yuma what's going on in his room, but he just ignores her and starts the next story. 4 kids play at the park: Ichijo, Ninomiya, and Mikami. The 4th kid is a pretty disturbed looking boy named Rajima. He asks if they'll all be friends forever. He's had a hard time making friends because he moves a lot, and asks if they'll pinky promise that they'll always hang out together. The other kids happily go along with it, and they all lock pinkies, chanting a common real-world phrase: "Pinky promise, 10,000 punches. If I lie, 1,000 needles down the hatch." Or something like that. Despite the promise, as time went on, the boys slowly stopped inviting Rajima to hang out, and soon they forgot about him altogether. Now adults, Ichijo gets a text from Mikami to meet him at the park as soon as possible. When he arrives, he finds Mikami is heavily bandaged and missing his pinky finger. He tells Ichijo that it was Rajima. He showed up out of nowhere and sliced it off. As they discuss the incident, Ichijo gets a text from the other friend, Ninomiya, who simply gives him a hospital room number. Ichijo rushes to the hospital and finds the room. He says that Rajima beat him mercilessly over and over again. It seems Rajima is out for revenge, and Ninomiya thinks the acts of violence are tied to the pinky promise they made all those years ago. First, he cut off Mikami's pinky. Then, on Ninomiya, he enacted the 10,000 punches, or at least it felt like that. And now, Ichijo is the next target to be punished. Ninomiya says the only way out of it might be for them to fulfill their promise and hang out with Rajima like old times. But Ichijo says no way, they were only friends with him because they felt sorry for him. Rajima's an ungrateful piece of shit. Ichijo starts to call the police but drops his phone by accident. When he leans down, he finds something disturbing. Ninomiya's real body beaten and disfigured, laying dead under the hospital bed. If this is the real Ninomiya, then who was he just talking to? The man removes the bandages from his head to reveal that familiar disturbed face of Rajima. He stands up, clutching sharp objects in his hand, and closes in on Ichijo, reciting the final section of the pinky promise. If you're lying, it's 1,000 needles down the hatch. That wraps up the story, and Yuma leaves his room saying he needs to get some air. Hina is clearly worried about him and tries to think of a way to stop all this. She then looks at the object on Yuma's desk and seems to get an idea. Story 80, the ultimate rehabilitation. The next day, Yuma enters his room and tells Hina not to get too close to the object. She seems to be hiding something behind her back, and Yuma starts the next story. A reporter arrives at a famous juvenile rehabilitation center to take a tour for his newspaper. They take in the worst offenders who repeatedly commit crimes, and miraculously, there's a 0% recidivism rate for the young men who leave here, meaning no one who has gone through this facility has ever committed another crime. They pass by some of the boys exercising outside who have huge smiles. It's kind of creepy actually. The reporter starts to snap some photos and the tour guide immediately jumps in the way of his camera. Now that we get a closer look, she's also got a creepy ass smile. As they enter the facility, the guide says something rather ominous in passing about how the new arrivals receive rehabilitation. This confuses the reporter, who wonders what she means by receiving rehab, as if it's an act done to them rather than a process of correction. She turns around and says, "Gosh, Sakurai, you already know what it means." This sends a shiver down the man's spine, and it's worth noting that he never said his name was Sakurai, only that he was a reporter. She continues the tour and says that after they're rehabilitated, they make sure the boys acclimate well to the lifestyles that the facility has chosen for them. The guide turns around and sees that Sakurai is gone. He snuck off to try and investigate what's really going on here. He eventually comes upon a room that says rehabilitation in progress and takes a peek inside. There seem to be doctors doing some kind of brain surgery on one of the arrivals. Apparently, they are essentially remaking the young criminal starting from the brain, saying it's the only way they can save him and return this world to how it was meant to be. Just then, the tour guide shows up and reminds Sakurai that trespassing is a crime. He pushes past her and runs, but soon the alarms sound off and security fans out to find him. Sakurai tries to process what he discovered as he makes his way outside. He looks over to see some of the boys playing baseball, and one of their hats falls off, revealing a massive scar and stitches all around their head. This confirms that the rehab going on here is really just brain surgery. Sakurai starts jumping the fence to leave, and his inner monologue starts shifting from plans to escape to the repeated thought not to tell anyone what he saw here. On the final panel, we see that Sakurai is actually having brain surgery done on him, and with a huge smile, he repeats that he won't say a word to anyone. It seems that Sakurai was actually a young criminal who's been put into this facility, but I have two thoughts on exactly what's happening. Either the entire thing was in Sakurai's head to begin with as he undergoes the surgery, or the whole thing was real and what we're seeing is after Sakurai has been caught. I actually think the latter makes the most sense, as the tour guide mentions how they place the rehabilitated criminals into assigned roles after they leave. Maybe Sakurai is meant to be a reporter when he leaves, and this scenario was part of the testing to see if he would be able to play the role. It's not entirely clear, but it's a cool story, and it reminds me a lot of Clockwork Orange. Yuma finishes the story and just walks out of the room without a word. Hina takes this as an opportunity to act. She pulls out a lighter and runs up to the object, lighting it on fire. Considering this object is our window into Yuma's room, the panels themselves start burning up, and we see Hina crying until finally we're just looking at a blank page. I'm sure at this point you guys have probably guessed what the object is on Yuma's desk, but I won't reveal it until the story does. We do know now that it was highly flammable and it burned up in the manner of a small piece of paper or photo. Story 81, the wife who couldn't return. Surprisingly, we still see Yuma standing over the ashes on his desk and putting something new down. He apologizes, saying he wasn't watching close enough, but he's glad that he had a spare. Then he begins the next story. A man named Ko gets a call from his wife Minami, who's on her way home. During the call, he suddenly hears a terrible crash and the line goes dead. This was the last conversation he ever had with Minami. While crossing the street, she was killed by a speeding car. Apparently, it was pretty brutal, dragging her body along the pavement for quite a while before finally stopping. As Ko kneels in remembrance, his phone starts buzzing, and he's thrown off to see that it's his wife calling. He doesn't know how this could be real, but reluctantly answers, and to his surprise, he hears Minami's voice saying that she's nearly home, just like she said in that original call moments before she died. Once again, there's a sickening crash, and Ko throws the phone to the ground. After this, he starts getting the same phone call from his dead wife every day, and every time she says she's nearly home before she's run over again. He can't stand the thought of Minami being forced to relive her death over and over. She calls again, and this time he immediately tells her to stop and not to cross the street. She lets out a small yell and tells him that she was almost hit by a car, but she's fine and she'll be home soon. Does this mean that he saved her? Is she really gonna come home like nothing ever happened? Well, soon there's a knock on the door, and Minami says she forgot her key, asking if Kou could open the door for her. He looks over and sees the memorial photo of her, reminding himself that she definitely died that day. But either way, he walks to the door and looks through the peephole. On the other side is his wife's horribly disfigured body looking back at him and yelling not to ignore her. Yuma ends the story and wonders why Hina would do something so terrible. At that moment, something really weird happens. The next panel is from a totally different perspective, as if someone is peeking in at Yuma from the hall. It really threw me off because it's never shifted point of view in the Yuma segments until now. Anyway, it shifts back and we see Hina enter the room. I guess we were seeing out of her eyes. Weird. Story 82, Ghost Pipes. Hima apologizes profusely for what she did to Yuma's most prized possession, and he forgives her, saying nothing came of it in the end. As an apology, Hina says that she'll tell today's story. It starts with the description of Monotropastrum humile, white flowers that grow under the shade of trees. Because of their appearance, they're often called ghost pipes, and some people believe that they grow above corpses. We see a kid named Masa looking up ghost pipes in a flower guide, and suspecting their nectar may be sweet, he picks one up and sucks on it. Well, his intuition was right, and the ghost pipe tastes amazing. He then spots a friend from class, Yota, and wonders what he's doing in this corner of the park. Yota says he was actually visiting his dog's grave, which just so happens to be right under the ghost pipes. Masa apologizes and jumps off the spot, and then insists that Yota try sucking on the ghost pipe. Yota is a little weirded out by a strange boy in the woods telling him to suck his pipe, but he eventually gives in, and just like Masa, he can't believe how good it is. The boys can't get enough and go on sucking the nectar from all the ghost pipes nearby until they finally run out. After this, Masa and Yota meet up every day after school to search for more ghost pipes, but they haven't had any luck finding any. Masa is so obsessed with the flavor that he stops eating other foods altogether. Compared to the ghost pipes, nothing really tastes right. After days of searching, the boys finally find a patch of the flower, and Masa doesn't hesitate to start slurping down the nectar from any that he can get his hands on. Yota stops him and points out that the ghost pipes are actually growing out of a skeleton. It looks like someone died here. It freaks them out for a minute, but it's not long before the craving takes over Masa and he continues to eat more, ignoring the fact that they're growing out of someone's corpse. Soon, Yota joins in too, stuffing multiple flowers in his mouth at once. Masa tells him to slow down and save some for him, but Yota ignores him and shovels more and more flowers into his mouth. Realizing they'll run out soon, Masa's famine mentality kicks in and he clutches a sharp stick in his hand. Days later, we see Masa in his back garden behind the shed, sucking down ghost pipes, which have grown out of a mound of dirt. It looks like Masa made his own batch using his friend's corpse. Now that's messed up. Hina finishes the story and something's off. Her eyes are black, and Yuma points out that that didn't sound like a typical Hina story. She turns to face him, well, her body does at least. Her head twists completely backwards like The Exorcist. It suddenly snaps forward and she seems to come back to normal and apologizes for not starting the story yet. Yuma is freaked out and tells her that she already told it. Story 83, Leather Bag. Hina sits on Yuma's bed and says that she feels like her memories are fading. She then falls asleep and Yuma starts the next story. It begins with a sales associate at a bag shop asking if a man wants to purchase a bag, but she says they only make sales to those who can honor the agreement. She holds up some instructions that tell the proper way to care for your bag. 1. Gently wipe away any dirt or debris. 2. Spray a generous amount of the special formula on the bag and leave it to soak. And 3. Rub protective cream over the bag for it to absorb. These are to be followed 3 times a day. The man agrees to follow the instructions and takes home his new bag. He applies the formula and rubs it down. It's kind of creepy how into it he is. Later, he looks at himself in the mirror holding the bag and thinks he's cool shit. He declares that he has to be someone who can live up to the bag. At lunch, he starts his routine of wiping it down and starts talking to it. One of his coworkers roasts him pretty severely, and the poor guy runs off. His coworker sees the special formula on his desk and says that he'll dispose of it as it's not work related. Later, the man desperately searches for it as the bag is way overdue for a rub down. Speaking of which, the bag is not looking great. The leather is all cracked and red with huge blemishes covering it. The man returns to the store and tells the lady what happened, showing her the bag, which looks even worse at this point. She starts trying to repair it, and he's curious about the special lotion he uses. It seems like it should be used for humans. The lady then casually tells him that the bags are made from human skin. It's the only thing that can produce such a great texture. She says that possessing such a high quality product can also improve the quality of the owner. She finishes applying more formula to the bag and then gives it back to the man. Learning that his bag was made from human skin, he's a little weirded out, but it jumps ahead to the future. The mean coworker from earlier is apologizing profusely to his boss about a contract he couldn't secure, and it's revealed that his boss is actually the man with the bag. It seems that he has been living up to its quality. Well, that was a weird one. As the story ends, Yuma goes over to check on Hina, and once again the point of view changes to Hina's perspective. She reaches out her hand and tousles Yuma's hair. Story 84, A Life of Beauty. Yuma says that Hina is late and maybe she can't make it today. Then he proceeds with the next story. A woman named Futaba talks about how beautiful her mother is. Despite being in her 50s, her mom looks like she's much younger. She asks Futaba if she can watch the younger kids while she's out for the day, and this seems like a pretty typical thing. In fact, Futaba looks kinda weathered considering she's only 30. She has the younger kids say good morning to a picture of their oldest sibling, Ichika, who is actually dead. Once Ichika died, Futaba was the next oldest and began taking care of all the chores and watching the children. The third oldest, Mina, refuses to help out and wants to enjoy her life as a 20-year-old. She coldly tells Futaba that doing chores all day is probably what's made her look so old. Later, Futaba finds a card for a beauty salon in her mother's coat pocket. No wonder she looks so good for her age. She's been hitting up the salon all the time. Futaba decides maybe she should try this herself and heads to the same salon. An employee hooks her up to a machine and asks how many years she'd like to restore her youth by. It's an odd way to phrase it, but Futaba says 5 years if possible. The strange employee smiles and says, well, that'll be 10 years off your lifespan. She says that in order to make her younger, they'll need to take 5 years from her life, and the other 5 is compensation for the service. Before Futaba can question the whole thing, she's put to sleep and the operation begins. When she wakes up, she looks great and is literally 5 years younger. When she picks up the kids from daycare, one of the employees is struck by her beauty and asks her out. This puts a big pep in her step, and Futaba decides to go back to the salon to get even younger. She's happy to give up another 10 years in order to gain back all the youth that she lost raising the kids. The employee frowns, however, and informs her that she doesn't have enough lifespan to give. The remaining years of her life have already been used up by her mother. So I guess they're able to take the lifespan off of your kids as well, which is pretty messed up. It means Futaba's mother not only used up her lifespan, but it implies she did the same to her eldest daughter who died previously. Even more disturbing, it kind of seems like the reason she has all these kids to begin with is as a constant source of lifespan for her to steal, which must be why at 50 she's still cranking them out. Yuma finishes the story and goes to bed, and later that night someone comes creeping down the hall and into his room. It's Hina, and her eyes are blacked out again. Even more surprising, she's walking upside down on the ceiling. Story 85, Being Held. Yuma says that Hina hasn't shown up today either, and starts on the next story. A girl spots her crush Seino sitting on a bench at the train station. This is pretty surprising because Seino died last week after jumping in front of a train. She recounts how he was always sick and was forced to sit out at gym class. So she often saw him sitting and staring and felt a connection to him as another outsider. She feels like if she ever worked up the courage to talk to him, maybe he wouldn't have offed himself. So now, seeing his ghost, she takes the opportunity to meet him officially. She tells him she understands what it must have been like for him and how if she had just spoken to him, maybe things would be different. Seino just turns his bloodshot eyes towards her. It's pretty unsettling, and she stands up feeling dumb. She apologizes to him and decides that she's just another one of his classmates that he hated. She starts to walk away when Seino's ghost finally speaks. He says that she's nothing like him and that he liked his classmates. That's why he tried his best to attend school despite his weak body. The morning he died, he actually fainted and fell on the tracks. It wasn't on purpose. He tells her not to act like she knows him by making up scenarios in her head. She breaks into tears and says she's sorry again. Seino then says he does have one regret. He wishes he could go to school one last time. The girl starts trying to help him off the bench and insists that he can come to school with her if he tries. He tells her his body can't make it there, and she grabs him by the arm and starts pulling, saying that he doesn't have to worry about his health anymore. He begs her to stop, but she just pulls harder and she yanks the dude's torso off. Yep, the train ripped him into pieces when he died, and they were only resting on top of each other on the bench. Seino starts screaming and grabbing at his legs. It's pretty sad. Well, I guess that's 2 times the girl made assumptions and was wrong. Yuma finishes up the story and rushes off to bed when the dark, menacing figure of his father shows up and looks like he's about to lay into Yuma as usual. He stops, however, when he hears something in the hall, and when he goes to look, we see Yuma's father get snatched up into the ceiling and disappear. Whoa. Story 86, Is Someone There? This chapter starts with Yuma telling his stepmom that he has no idea where his father is. He tells Hina he's sorry for all the fuss, but his dad hasn't come back since yesterday. He sits down and begins the next story. It starts with an ominous death. A woman found dead in her apartment with her mouth slashed open side to side like a Glasgow smile. How could anyone be so cruel? Well, we're about to find out as it jumps back 1 week prior. We see the woman talking with her friend when she sees an eye looking at her from the balcony. She freaks out and closes the shades tight. She apologizes for her behavior to her friend, but lately she's been feeling like someone's watching her. Her friend says that instead of closing the curtains, she should fully open them. That way she'd know for certain that something's there instead of being worried about what's lurking behind it. She even demonstrates by opening the curtains and saying, "See, now there's a 0% chance that anything's there." The girl's friend leaves, and later she imagines someone watching her from the closet. Taking her friend's advice, she opens the doors wide, proving that there was nothing inside. Next, she gets spooked by the curtains on her balcony window again and imagines someone hiding behind them. She takes a breath and pulls them open, and once again, there's nothing there but her reflection. On a closer look, she then sees an eye looking at her from inside the reflection of her own mouth. She screams and grabs a pair of scissors. Then, in the final panel, the girl horrifically slices her own mouth open where we can see the face of a person peeking out. It's a really disturbing image, but I guess she wanted to open her mouth up so that there would be a 0% chance of anything being inside. After the story, Hina says that she's been really sleepy lately, and whenever she falls asleep, she has vivid dreams. In them, she was watching Yuma's father until finally last night she dreamed that she killed him. Story 87, Siva Talk. There's loud banging and clatter throughout the house, and Yuma apologizes to Hina. It seems that this is his distraught stepmother's doing, as his father still hasn't come back. Yuma tells her not to worry about it and starts the next story. An old man enters a small room where there's a large booth labeled Civitalk with rates by the minute posted nearby. It's his first time using the machine, which describes Civitalk as an AI service that uses photographic data to recreate someone you can have a conversation with. The man feeds it 5,000 yen, which gives him 10 minutes of time, and he also gives it a photo of a beautiful young woman, his high school sweetheart. Suddenly, the photo comes to life, and it's as if the young woman is right in front of him in the booth. Her name is Namiko, and the old man is in shock. She recognizes him as Takeo, and the 10 minutes fly by as they relive their best moments together. Before the timer runs out, Namiko asks about Takeo's current life and looks disappointed to find out that he's married. He says that the romance has fizzled out from the marriage and his wife is only with him for his pension. He declares that Namiko is the only woman he's ever loved. Later, he arrives home and his wife is just watching TV. He asks about dinner, and the wrinkly old bag just makes a mean face and points to the table where there are a few stale Rice Crisps. Takeo then starts seeing Namiko every day after work, but one day he tells her he can't come back anymore as his wife has caught on to his spending habits and hid his money and checkbook from him. Tears well up in Namiko's eyes, and she says that it's probably for the best. Rather than someone who's gone, he should cherish the person he has by his side. Takeo gets home and does the opposite. He sneaks up on his wife and attempts to strangle her with a rope. But she catches on to him and he panics, running out of the house. She chases him all the way to the Civitalk machine where she finds him talking once again to Namiko, and she wonders why her husband is talking to her when she was younger. The old man freaks out, saying that it's not her, and in the final panel we hear a smashing sound. It's a great reveal. The old man wasn't talking to some other woman from his youth, but rather his wife from back when he first fell in love with her. It'd almost be sweet in another context, but here it's just sad as hell. The story ends and Hina tells Yuma that she's still having the dreams, and now she sees another person in them, his stepmom. Speak of the devil, Yuma's stepmom enters the room and yells at Hina to go home. Story 88, Let's Go to the Park. Yuma and Hina are discussing her dreams again, and she says that each dream she gets closer to his stepmom. As they talk, Hina passes out, and I guess Yuma's used to it by now as he just starts the next story. This one starts with an ominous dark panel of a creepy man saying, "Let's go to the park." It cuts to a man named Kenichi and his young son now walking past a park. The boy begs his father to let them play. Kenichi says he's sorry, but he has a severe phobia of slides, and that maybe now his mother can bring him later. In that typical child fashion of having no tact, the boy says, "Is it because Grandpa died falling down a slide?" And the kid is right. The reason Kenichi is afraid of slides is because his father fell off a slide and died while saving him from falling. Well, now just ignores his father's deep-seated trauma and runs into the park laughing. He climbs the slide and tells his father there's nothing to be scared of, but Kenichi is hit with terrifying flashbacks of his father, suggesting they go to the park. Every step he climbs in pursuit of his son, more memories come flooding back to him. We learn that in reality, this was no average park visit. Kenichi's drunken father woke him up in the middle of the night to take him. In a panel of the future and the past mirroring each other, we see Kenichi as a boy and his father sitting at the edge of the slide, while in the present, he now stands behind his son. In another flashback, Kenichi's father asks for a little push, and still a naive child, he does so with a smile. In a really terrifying image, Kenichi suddenly sees his son now asking the same thing, only he has his father's head on his body. Then the full truth hits him all at once. In the final flashback, we see that Kenichi's father had a rope around him, and Kenichi unknowingly helped his father end his own life. Now that is messed up. The story ends and Yuma notices that Hina is back awake. She starts creeping into the hall, and when Yuma calls to her, her head spins around backwards with black eyes. She says that she needs to make sure the house is nice and tidy before she leaves. Story 89, Natto. Yuma sits at his desk and says, "You're coming back. You're actually gonna come back," and begins crying before telling the 89th story. A woman named Asa talks about a natto shop by her house and how good it's gotten lately. By the way, natto is a traditional Japanese dish made from fermented soybeans. I've never had it, but it doesn't look all that appetizing. Anyway, apparently the natto from the shop is pretty damn good. Having eaten up all of her recent order within a day, Asa heads back to the shop to get more. She knows the old lady who runs the shop by name and asks why it's gotten so good lately. The old woman is vague, but says she changed up her fermenting process recently. She did some research and found an ancient process of making natto. Asa's too curious and asks her what she changed, and the woman shockingly says that she started fermenting the natto with human meat. Asa is obviously flustered, but the woman starts laughing and says she's only joking. Asa is relieved to hear it and grabs her order, though she does notice the fact that the woman is wearing oversized black gloves. It's kinda weird. Later, Asa digs into the beans, and despite the unnerving joke the old woman told, the beans are delicious. Then, Asa bites something hard and pulls a human nail out of her mouth. Well, I just about threw up. Asa rushes back to the shop with the nail in a baggie and tells the woman what she found. The lady apologizes, saying sometimes stuff like this can happen, and offers Asa a replacement batch on the house. The woman then slides off her black gloves, and her hands are fine. She's not missing any fingers or anything, if that's what you were thinking. Asa is relieved and forgives the mistake when she sees all the extra natto the old woman threw in. She heads out, and the woman looks at a picture of her presumably dead husband, saying, "Don't worry, I'll protect the shop no matter what it takes." And now that we can see the woman's full body behind the counter, she's missing a leg, implying Asa's suspicions were true and the woman fermented the natto with her own foot. After the story, Yuma contemplates what Hina said and seems to know that she's going to get rid of his stepmom. Story 90, Letters from a Parent. The chapter opens with Hina tied up on Yuma's bed. He apologizes, but she says she understands. He's only doing this because he has to. Then he begins the next story. A boy named Kokoro sends a letter to his deceased mother asking what happened and saying how lonely he is. He leaves it in a memory book, and later his father discovers the note inside. The next time Kokoro opens it, he finds a letter from his mom. Seems like a nice thing his father did, but when Kokoro shows his father the letter, he gets pissed and rips it up, telling Kokoro to stop with these pranks. The poor kid falls to his knees crying, and this is not the response you'd expect if it really is his father who wrote it. Regardless, the years go by and Kokoro continues to communicate with his dead mom by leaving and finding notes in the memory book. Now that he's older, Kokoro finally realizes it must be his father who wrote the notes. Kokoro gets his college entrance exams in the mail and finds that he's failed. His father finds out and just says that he's too slow for college anyway, and he needs to get a job to support the family. Kokoro throws a tantrum and ends up finding the memory book, which he hadn't looked at in a while. Inside is a note from his mother saying he can do anything he puts his mind to. He just doesn't get it. No matter how much of a drunken mess his father is, he still seems to be writing the notes in the voice of Kokoro's mother. Eventually, on his deathbed, Kokoro's father says he doesn't think he'll be able to write to him from the other side. And Kokoro takes this as his father admitting that he was the one writing the notes. After his death, Kokoro finds a note on his father's memorial shrine that says, "Sorry for all the trouble. Thank you for everything." This causes the kid to break down, wondering why his father never said anything like that while he was still alive. Looking at the memory book one last time, Kokoro finds another letter from his mother, and this time his father couldn't have written it. She mentions that she got Kokoro's letter from when he was little, that asked why she died, but she couldn't answer him at the time, because it's against the rules for ghosts to interfere with the lives of the living. But now she can tell him the truth. She was murdered by his father. The story ends there, and Yuma looks over to see Hina's sleeping body start wiggling around. He holds holds her body still and says don't hurt her, she's scared too, and begs the entity not to kill Hina. Finally, he says who he believes he's talking to, his mother. At this point, it seems obvious, but the person Yuma's been talking to this whole time is his mother, and he's been telling the 100 stories in hopes of bringing her back as a ghost. Well, it seems like it may be working. Story 91, Poltergeist. Yuma wakes up at his desk and finds his blanket draped over his shoulders. Meanwhile, Hina is clearly cold and curled up on the bed. He walks over and puts the blanket over her before starting the next story. This one starts off pretty crazy, with a man pissing on his father's grave. After this, he walks into the large house that he grew up in. He greets his younger brother and mother, but they seem pretty pissed that he's even here, especially his brother, who yells at him. The man asks if it's really that strange to return home on Obon. This is a sort of traditional Japanese festival to honor ancestral spirits. Anyway, the younger brother says that he hasn't been home in years and that he didn't even show up to Dad's funeral. He accuses his older brother of hating their dad and chastises him for reeking of alcohol. The older brother just cheekily says, "Just like Dad then, huh?" As the tensions rise, they hear the front door open in the other room, but don't see anyone come inside. There's a loud noise from elsewhere in the house, and they go investigate to find that the bathroom is completely trashed, like someone peed all over the toilet seat. Then several objects start falling and breaking, and the younger son decides that this must be their father's spirit, and he's angry. He believes it's the older brother's fault and tells him to leave. But the older brother says even if he didn't visit home, he always stopped by his father's grave. He then realizes what's happening and starts laughing. We get a flashback to him standing at the father's grave, only now we can see that he wasn't actually pissing on it, he was pouring out sake for his father. So basically their father's ghost didn't show up angry, he just showed up shit-faced. Okay, that's kind of funny. Yuma finishes the story and notices that Hina is gone from the bed, although he calls her mom, and she walks in the room holding a tray of food telling him dinner's ready. He hugs her tightly and asks her to never leave him again. Story 92, Zashiki Warashi. Yuma and Hina, or should I say Yuma and his mom, are having a great time playing games and eating snacks when she tells him it's time he tells the next story. Sometime decades in the past, a woman walks into a room of a large house and looks disturbed that someone is missing. It then jumps ahead 30 years and we see a large hotel. The lady running the place tells the most senior employee, Takarada, that she'll have to take over for the head of staff since he died under suspicious circumstances. Takarada gladly takes on the responsibility, but is a little thrown off by her first task. She must bring food into a room which all other staff are forbidden from entering. The owner tells her she must always knock before entering and to lock the door behind her immediately. Then she must take off her shoes and place them facing opposite directions. They both do so and move further into the chamber where they see an old doll. The owner announces that they've brought a meal and tells Takarada the final step is to remove yesterday's meal and replace it with a new one. She says that following these instructions is crucial to the fate of the hotel, and hands her the room key. That night, Takarada sneaks over to the room and enters without any food. She places her shoes on the ground, but both facing the same direction, and then, kneeling, says, "Please come home." We hear the sound of tiny footsteps, and then two small feet step into the shoes, and the doll walks out of the room. Takarada smiles, and it seems that this was her plan. The owner is alarmed to see a small child come down the elevator in the middle of the night, and is shocked when she realizes who it really is. The doll then hits her so hard that the woman's head flies off and rolls on the ground. Takarada then says that whenever a Zashiki Warashi leaves their room, in exchange for all the benefits it granted, it takes the life of the owner. She knows this because the woman from 30 years ago was her mother. Their Zashiki Warashi was stolen, and on that day, she died. After all these years, Takarada can finally welcome the doll home. This story is based on the real yokai and translates to Zashiki child, Zashiki being a kind of sitting room. They're believed to bring great fortune to any house they reside in, but are exceedingly rare to actually catch sight of. Anyway, Yuma finishes the story and Hina/his mom starts clapping. He tells her he thinks it's time to stop telling the stories since he's already able to see her, but her face distorts and she yells that that's not allowed. Her face elongates and she says that if he stops, she'll disappear. Only a little longer and this body will be all hers. Story 93, Ghost Photo. Yuma sits looking nervous at his desk while his mom cleans the room. She then asks him to finish the next story and he reluctantly starts it. Two friends are hanging out in a creepy tunnel and take a photo. While reviewing it, they notice what looks like a ghost woman in the background. They both yell and start running, terrified. The next day, they talk on the phone about how creepy it was, and one of the guys asks the other to take a picture of the slides in class for him for note-taking. Class starts, and the man takes a photo of the notes, but when he reviews it, he notices something in the corner. It looks like the ghost woman. Of course, he sees nothing in real life, so he snaps a few more pictures and sees the girl in each one, and she's getting closer. He's terrified and runs out of the class. Then he sends the pictures to his friends, telling him the ghost from yesterday is chasing him. The problem is he can only see it in the photos, so he runs down the hall snapping pictures behind him. His friend then tells him to stop. If the ghost really has been chasing him since yesterday, wouldn't it have caught him by now? He thinks that the ghost can only move toward him when he takes the photos. The friend says he'll head over and hangs up, leaving the man standing terrified in the hallway. He feels blind, and against his better judgment, he takes a couple more pictures where he sees the girl is only feet away from him. Seemingly confirming his friend's theory, he stops taking pictures and heads back to his apartment. He nervously waits for his friend to pick him up and checks his phone, but his password isn't working. He then uses the Face ID, but it doesn't recognize his face. That's because it didn't track his face, but the woman who's now standing right behind him. And she reaches out of the phone itself to choke him. Yuma finishes the story, and the possessed Hina says, "Good, only 7 more to go." Yuma asks her what will happen to Hina, and she says that she'll be fine, she'll go up to heaven. Yuma asks if there's a way that he can save them both, but his mom says it's too late, and reminds him that they made a wish to live happily together again, didn't they? Story 94, I'm here. Yuma just sits sweating at his desk, and the possessed Hina tells him to get to the story already. It begins with a lost little girl trying to find her way home, and at a reflex she cries for her father to help her. She then looks up to see a man standing and pointing down an alley. It's her father, though she looks surprised to see him, and something's just off here. As she approaches him, he disappears and appears again down the alley, still pointing. This continues until he's guided her all the way home. Her mother was worried sick about her, and the little girl explains that her dad helped her. The mom looks a little disturbed and reminds the girl that her father died a month ago. The girl tries to prove it by showing her mom, but the man is nowhere to be seen. The next day, she's playing at the park when her father appears, pointing toward the house. He successfully guides her home again, and as the girl eats dinner with her mom, the man appears once again. The girl smiles and points him out to her mother, but she clearly doesn't see anything. This time, her father's expression looks different. He seems like he's scared or in pain, and he keeps pointing, eventually guiding the girl to the back porch. There, she finds him outside, pointing at the dirt. It looks like something is buried here. That's the last panel, and I think the implication is that his corpse is under the porch and that the girl's mother killed him. Yuma finishes the story, and his mom starts storming out of the room, saying she realizes how tough this is for him. He's gonna have to decide whether he wants her or Hina more. She tries to leave, but Yuma stops her and falls to his knees, begging her to stay. Story 95. That shrine. Yuma wonders if Hina will be happy in heaven, and his mom, or the spirit claiming to be his mom, says of course she will, it's a wonderful place. She insists he tell the next story. In it, a woman arrives at what's called the Wayside Shrine for Babies, and there's a sign posted nearby that says no offerings allowed. The woman prays to the shrine, asking that it grant her and her husband a child soon. She starts to walk away when she hears a small cry. When she turns around, she sees a small statue resembling a baby. She asks if it's hungry and gives it all she has, a small piece of candy. It smiles and stops crying, and the girl takes this as a good omen. She leaves the shrine and runs into an old woman at the bottom of the steps. The woman is surprised to see someone so young here, and the girl says she figures a lot of people would come here to wish for a child. The old lady looks worried and says that she's got it wrong. You wouldn't want a child born from that blessing. Apparently, the shrine was built to pay respect to the bitterness and resentment that infants hold. That's because years ago, countless babies were abandoned on this mountain, so their parents would have less mouths to feed. She asks the young woman if she made any offerings and tells her to stay as far away as possible. The girl then runs back to the shrine, thinking she should probably take back that piece of candy. However, as she climbs the steps, she starts feeling really heavy and suddenly pukes all over. At the same time, her stomach starts rapidly expanding as if she was in her 3rd trimester. Even more disturbing, small feet kick violently from inside her belly. She finally makes it back to the statue, and it's gone. Only the candy wrapper remains, and the woman begins hearing the sound of a crying baby coming from her own womb. As Yuma finishes the story, he asks his mom if he could see Hina one more time to properly say goodbye. Story 96, The Perfect Copy. Yuma's mother lays down to sleep and tells him not to talk to Hina longer than he needs to. While he waits for the real Hina to wake back up, he tells the next story. A mad scientist has created a biological 3D printer, the likes of which the world has never seen. After trying to copy an apple with thousands of failed attempts, he finally gets a perfect match. Next, he moves on to animal trials and successfully duplicates clones of them. So now is the final test, to make a perfect human clone. On his first attempt, it seems to work, but his clone is unresponsive. While the body is intact, this is no different than a puppet. The clone speaks, but can only mutter the words, "It hurts," over and over. The scientist doesn't bat an eye at the pain his clone is in, and instead is happy that there does seem to be consciousness. So like the apples, he tries over and over to get the perfect match. It's pretty disturbing seeing all the bodies pile up in the corner and begin to rot. Finally, he makes a breakthrough with a near perfect clone that can actually think more complex thoughts. In this case, the clone is crying out in pain as the scientist looks at its internal organs. Like usual, he shows zero empathy and just laughs at the clone. He does one last attempt, and this time he's sure that it'll finally work. He gets into the cloning pod and successfully makes another copy. However, this time, his pod won't open. He's locked in. He then sees his clone exit the other pod and examine him, saying that he's finally made the perfect copy and that this copy even believes he's the original. The scientist denies this. He remembers walking into the pod and initiating the process himself. Well, that's because it really is a perfect match, including memories. So it's kind of a cool way to do this. It switched us to the clone's perspective to simulate how it would feel. From the clone's perspective, he feels no different than the scientist who started the experiment. Well, the original scientist puts his clone down on the operating table and checks out his organs. Of course, the clone cries in agony, but proving that he really is a match this time, he's actually smiling at his own handiwork. Yuma finishes the story and Hina wakes up in bed, the real Hina this time. He tells her that his mom is going to come back and she's happy for him. Then she asks him how, and he just stares at her awkwardly. Story 97. Kokori-san. Yuma tells Hina that his mom is nearly back, and to mark the occasion, he wants to hear one of her stories. The story starts with some kids playing a game of kokori, similar to something like a Ouija board. The students place their fingers on a coin and see if spirits communicate with them by moving the coin to spell out phrases or answer yes and no. On this occasion, they get no response and give the coin back to the girl who donated it, Shiori. They also tell her she needs to spend it soon or she'll be cursed. A boy named Asama sees it and asks if he can trade her 10 yen for 2 5s. She does the trade and is beat red. That's because Asama is her crush and she finally works up the courage to confess her feelings to him. Afraid of what his answer might be, she tells him not to speak and that he can tell her after they return from winter break. He tries to stop her, but she runs off. After winter vacation, Shiori and the rest of the class are informed that Asama lost his life in a traffic accident. Shiori blames herself. If she let him answer, maybe they would have spent winter vacation as a couple and Asama would still be alive. Some of her classmates argue over whether it would be in poor taste to try another game of kokori to try and talk to Asama from beyond the grave. Shiori encourages it and joins in. To all of their surprise, this time the coin starts moving and soon Asama answers from the other side. Shiori takes the opportunity to ask if he had feelings for her and he says no. She breaks down crying, but not from disappointment, rather from relief, as now she doesn't feel guilty for his death. Which is kind of messed up because she gave him the cursed coin that likely got him killed. An interesting angle on this is you could look at it as if there's no supernatural elements at all. Like minigames of this nature, all it takes is for one person to move the coin even subconsciously to give the spooky effect. What if Shiori moved the coin subconsciously in order to relieve her own guilt over the situation? Anyway, Hina ends the story and tells Yuma that she actually met his mom before she died. One time at a school event, Hina was feeling really sick and Yuma's mother noticed and spoke up for her, even escorting her to the nurse's office. Hina never got a chance to thank her, but is happy that soon she might be able to. Yuma looks guilty as hell, knowing full well that Hina won't be around to do that. Story 98. Ghost marriage. Hina's back to being possessed and asks Yuma if he's done with his goodbyes and if Hina suspected anything. Yuma assures her Hina had no idea and they move on to the next story. A man's trying to get into his apartment when his ex-girlfriend Kyoko comes up behind him. I guess she's become sort of a stalker and says that if he won't marry her, then they'll just have a ghost marriage, whatever that means. The man just ignores her until he notices she's holding a knife. The man takes action and tries to grab the knife from her hands, and in the struggle, it slices right through Kyoko's neck. He calls the police and luckily isn't charged with anything because a security camera caught the whole thing, making it clear that this was self-defense. One day while checking his mail, the guy sees a red letter from Kyoko. Inside is a photo of Kyoko in traditional bridal wear as well as a lock of her hair. Freaked out, the man starts researching ghost marriages and learns that a woman can put her photo and hair into an envelope, and after death, if a man opens it, he enters into a ghost marriage. He starts realizing that this was her plan all along, as Kyoko was smiling when she died. The man then burns the photo and her hair on the stove, but someone rings the doorbell. It turns out to be Kyoko's family, who are congratulating him on the marriage. After the story, Yuma asks his mother if she can return Hina's body to her house for one day. That way she can see her mother one last time before she dies. Then she can come back here and they can celebrate the 100th story together. Story 99. Hanako-san of the toilet. Yuma wonders why his mom hasn't left yet, and she says that she wanted to hear the 99th story before she brought Hina back to her house for the day. The story follows a girl named Kaori who keeps knocking on the bathroom stall door calling for Hanako-san to come out and play. This is another real-life urban legend about a girl who haunts bathrooms in Japan. Kaori enters the stall and begs Hanako to return her big sister to her. Later, some classmates ask her why she keeps going to the third floor bathroom by herself. She explains that her sister and best friend died suddenly one day in the third floor bathroom. Kaori believes she was dragged in by Hanako, and her classmates just make fun of her for believing such a childish story. Later, Kaori returns to the bathroom, this time with a rope, hoping to pull her sister out of the toilet. Suddenly, there's a loud banging on the stall door, scaring the crap out of her, but of course this was only her classmates messing with her. Feeling a little silly, Kaori starts to leave, but the rope in her hand goes taut, as if someone has grabbed the end of it. She starts pulling it until she actually sees a small hand holding the other side in the drain. But she loses her grip and drops the rope, which is pulled down the toilet. Determined to save her sister, Kaori arrives the next day with even longer rope. Walking through the hall, she overhears her classmates making fun of her. They looked into it, and the real story is that Kaori's sister apparently took her own life after being bullied so much. They feel bad for making fun of her now, assuming she just can't accept her sister's death. Kaori returns to the toilet regardless and once again lowers the rope down the drain. A hand grabs on and starts pulling the rope. This time they make it arm's length out of the toilet and actually grab Kaori's hair. They're not trying to get out, they're trying to pull her in. Just then, another set of hands reaches out and stops the first pair, pulling them both down into the toilet. In the end, it seems Hanako was trying to pull Kaori in and her sister saved her. Once Kaori realizes this, she can't help but reach out again for her sister, and on the final panel, we just hear strange sounds coming from the toilet, and the girl is nowhere to be seen. Yuma ends it, and his mom heads off to Hina's, saying she's excited for the last story tomorrow. After she leaves, Yuma sits at his desk and seems to grab the photo as the screen goes black. There's sounds of a struggle, and we hear Yuma thanking Hina before even more disturbing noises. Story 100. Mom. This chapter starts with a fuzzy black screen. We see a figure asking if anyone can hear them, and then they begin a story. This story is about a boy named Yuma. He wakes up in the middle of the night scared and asks his mom if he can sleep with her. She's beautiful and kind and happily lets him jump in the bed. As he lays down, his mother tells him not to be afraid. Actually, she keeps repeating this phrase and slowly wraps her hand around his neck. Yuma wakes up in a cold sweat. This was only a dream or nightmare. He looks over at his desk to see a framed picture of his mom. Yeah, at this point it was obvious, but the entire time Yuma was talking to a photo of his mother, and we were seeing through the perspective of the frame. Yuma clutches it in his arms and cries when his father and stepmom come into the room. It's kind of weird seeing them as normal people instead of scary entities standing at the edge of the room. His father yells at him for continuing to cry about his mother's death and punches the poor kid in the stomach. He then stomps Yuma on the ground while his stepmom laughs, in case he didn't hate these people enough. Yuma just covers his head and looks up at the photo of his mom when there's an eerie sound from somewhere in the house, causing his dad to leave. Yuma can't help but feel like this wasn't a coincidence and that his mom was looking out for him. After this incident, Yuma dedicated all his time to researching the afterlife and the underworld. While he studies at the library, he runs into a girl named Hina from his class. She properly introduces herself and notices his interest in ghosts. Yuma says he just wants to know if his mom is still nearby. He says that if his mom is still worried about him, she may be stuck in the underworld, so he has to hurry and save her. It jumps ahead to that fateful day when Yuma stares out the third floor window of the school ready to jump. Of course, Hina stops him, and this time we get a deeper look at the conversation that started everything. Hina says doing this would only bring Yuma's mom more sadness. She grabs him by the hand and tells him there's a way he can see his mom again without dying. She asks if he knows about the 100 ghost stories. So Yuma's been telling the stories all along, hoping to bring his mother back as a ghost. The story ends there, and it's actually Hina who's talking in her own room. She looks completely back to normal with no signs of possession. She says that she really thought Yuma would die if she didn't do anything back then. Unfortunately, things only got worse after that. There's a knock at the door, and Hina's mother says she got a letter. It's from Yuma, and she holds it up so we can see it. He says that when Hina told him about the ghost stories, it gave him hope, but somewhere along the way, he wanted more. He wanted to live together with his mom again, and if Hina died, he would have been able to, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. He thanks her for never making him choose. He's going to heaven to be with his mom now. Goodbye. Hina shivers and starts crying, calling Yuma cruel. Up until the end, he never confided in her and ultimately chose his mom. She just wishes she could have been there to stop him. She says, "I guess there's no holding back now." That puts an end to the first story, and clicks the lights off. And that, my friends, is the 100 ghost stories that will lead to my own death. It looks like in the end, Yuma did end his life in order to see his mother. And now, in order to contact him, Hina has begun her own round of 100 stories, creating a vicious cycle. My guess is that Hina is actually talking to a photo of Yuma, similarly to how he spoke to his mother. I wasn't sure what to expect from the ending, but man, it's a pretty sad way to end it, I have to say. It's kind of sad to see this series end, as I've dedicated hundreds of hours into covering it over the last couple months, but it's really been a blast. As I've said before, it's amazing to me how the author, Anji Matono, was able to come up with so many stories that were all creepy and engaging. Anyway, what did you guys think of the ending, and what were your favorite stories along the way? Let me know in the comments. Shout out to Kill Me Katie as always for the intro and outro music, which is likely playing right now. And if you want to see your art at the end of my videos, email me a submission to the address below with a name or social media handle. But I appreciate you guys watching at all. This is Grief speaking. Goodbye, friends.